Anybody know if Victor's going to be here?
He'll be here. He's been coming in late.
Okay.
So.
Well, let me go find the birthday girl, but we're gonna sing happy birthday to Elise.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, guys.
Happy birthday, Apple. Peace to you. Random girl that's
I told them that you were
He's trying to sack her. Right behind you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear me. Happy birthday to you. Thank you.
Oh, I'm in here before you guys. What time? Do you guys know what outline is missing from the Barbie? Is there remedies that's missing from the list of Barbie outlines?
No, there's two. It's family and it might be remedies, but there's definitely two missing.
Yeah, because I think I have 14 total or something.
Yeah.
14 outlines. And two of them are the same thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's two missing.
Yeah. Yeah, looking at the remedies, yeah.
The remedies, the torts and the contracts have like a substantial remedies section, so is that part of that? Maybe?
Probably. I don't know about community property though. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, there's no penalties. Is there anything about Barbie Island in existence?
Yes, I think that we will get one hopefully when. Are you guys already in Barbary? Like your own Barbary?
I'm gonna get it like this week. I'm gonna.
I have them delivered. I haven't looked through them yet, but I printed all the ones that you gave us back in.
Yeah, I was reviewing those and I was like, it's 14 subjects, but two of them are like one subject. So
Right, but there's actually two missing. It might be remedies. I can text you when I get home. I'll look at it real quick. They're all sitting out on the table.
I was like, there's not gonna be any probate, I'm guessing. Right? There's no federal probate.
Well, it's not a multi-state subject, but it's on the bar.
It's on the bar system.
Well, they can ask you about California program. They can ask you about intestacy, not a whole lot. They do ask intestacy on the essays from time to time. Because you do have to know, sometimes you have to
Something about it.
know. I mean, it's not that big a deal. It's usually just, well, if it goes to intestacy, it'll do this. So, pretty much. So you do have to know sort of how it works. And that's it. They don't do that very much. They used to do it a lot. But they stopped doing it because people were more and more like, the modern world. And it used to be back in the good old days, they would even ask you stuff about, I haven't done it a long, long time ago, but we had to study things a lot more closely than you did. Things like, what do you call it? Purse strips and things like that. And you actually had to be able to do it. And it's like, really? Who in the world? There's one state that even acknowledges purse strips as as sort of their form of. They don't even use it. It's just every modern state doesn't use purse strips anymore as their version of how their intestacy works. They all use some kind of per capita system. Just depends which one, except Nebraska. Nebraska still goes, if you could die without a will, it still goes per strips, which is completely bizarre because it cuts out, parts of your family. So we don't know why they do that. But on the other hand, who knows why anyone does anything in Nebraska for the most part? So. Why does anyone even live in Nebraska? I mean, you have to ask yourself these questions from time to time.
See,
anyone here from Nebraska? Anyways, that's
Oh, when I see those rural states, I'm like, well, how many people actually do live there?
Well, you got to see those. Today not that it's remedy oriented, but today they actually in Congress
Excuse me. Did you figure out which name you want to use? All four of
Yeah, I
them?
was talking about all four of them. So
Okay,
I'm
I
going
go
to use
through
the
it.
exact spell.
Email them to me.
Victor, Adrian, Landis, ours, the whole thing.
The last name? Squires?
Both last names.
Got it. Okay, I knew three of them. I thought I had seen four once before.
No, there's four.
All right.
Almost ready.
okay. They introduced in Congress today a constitutional amendment to change the Electoral College. Now, it just so happens that of all the amendments, the amendment that has been challenged, or you can call it the doctrine of law, that has been challenged more than any other, is the Electoral College. There's been over 700 attempts to change it. And there's no other part of the Constitution that even comes close to that.
I don't know much about like the electoral college, but from what I read of it, they don't even have to follow what the voters say, right? It's a group of people that just kind of pick whoever they want
Right,
to
they
be
call
president.
them electors.
Yeah, and then who
Well,
controls
some of them do. Some states you don't have any choice, but some of them don't.
Mhm.
And because it's very old law. And
Who picks the electors?
well, they get elected.
They elect the elector.
Yeah, you go and you apply, and you go and it's. Well, I mean, some people are just automatically electors in some states, but in California, you can actually apply to be an elector and things of that nature. I've always thought about it, but I never do it because theoretically, then you want to go and you have to attend the Democratic or Republican convention,
Mhm.
and personally speaking, I really wanted to do that.
Do you get paid or?
No, you're not getting paid. You pay
I think that worries me. That's
pay
like,
away.
oh yeah, I was like, that's not worrying. It's like an easily bribable system.
No, you can't.
You can't bribe the electoral college.
No, you can't. So, that's what people do. You can't be paid, and you're not paid. Actually, if you were paid, that would be bad. That'd be hard.
Mhm.
So it's an interesting theory. It's an interesting way to do it, but we'll see what happens. I mean, again, constitutional amendment. Okay, so this is number 701 try. And what does that tell you? Probably won't go too far. But the interesting thing, which you just asked me and what I thought about it, was because if you actually see, and you can see it online, there's a whole bunch of them. If you actually see a map of where the population of the United States is, it's just like these little dots all over the place. That's where like 90% of it is. It's just these little tiny dots, and everything else is just, sand and trees or whatever else have you out there. Most of the United States is pretty much uninhabited actually when you see this, and it's just kind of a funny thing. I don't know what else to say really about it. I mean, I'm glad that sand and trees have a vote or something. I'm sure that's why people like the electric college, but it's outdated. It's from my perspective, it should have been overturned a long time ago. Is that, in my mind, is actually very anti-democratic. So,
What do they want to replace it with? It's a straight vote?
straight vote.
Straight vote?
Well, what would happen is they would just change it to a popular vote, or they could change it to where each state has to cast their votes for the actual, winner of the popular vote. But, it's all sorts of stuff they can do, so it's not a particularly big deal.
I still think we should make an app for it. Just one from your phone.
Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. So I don't know what they're going to do, but it's probably just as well they do something soon, though, because there's too many plots and plans right now that are going on. Most of them are not real good. So breaking up states into districts. The whole thing. It's just this is nonsensical. It's like you want to have I don't know. It just makes. I just think it's ridiculous. It's like, well, we have to protect people who live in states that aren't, populated. And my answer is always, why? It's not constitutional. I don't understand how that is a constitutional commandment. I'm sure maybe someone could explain it to me, but I don't think it is.
I was just texting her my name.
So now they had is a cake break there. We are a friendly school, I tell you. Something to watch for, though. It's also a good idea to gotta change the Senate too. It'd be a very, very good way to do that. So, okay. All right, so where are we today? Let's see, remedies class, huh? All right, anything that anybody would like to talk about when it comes to the bar? Anyone have any concerns? Anyone been doing anything, thinking about it?
I think we all just registered. We all just registered with this.
Oh, did you? Okay, good for you guys. Yeah, good. That's a good start. Definitely want to do that. Good. Anything else? No, you guys just ready to rock and roll. Okay, well, that works for me too. Believe it or not.
I get the hotels ready, and food plan.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, then let's go ahead and do some remedies. Start with remedies. Let's see where that takes us. Resolve. That's a good idea. So, let's see, we're talking about now recovering more than the plaintiff lost. Okay, of course, again, that sounds fairly odd that they would be able to do that, but, again, sometimes it happens from time to time. One of those areas where it does happen is one where we call disgorging profits of conscious wrongdoers. Therefore, in the sense that a wrongdoer does something wrong, right, then what do? I mean, if they do something wrong, but then they profit by their evil act, so to speak, what do you do with the profit? Well, you give it to the original harmed party. Where have we already seen that, actually? We've already seen that theory. That's shouldn't be as weird as you think.
Real property.
Real property, and what else?
Well, we got an IP, but
Well, what else have you had? What does that sound like? How is it possible that you could lose, $30,000 and be richly rewarded by a lot more money sometimes? Whatever number you want to throw down.
Tort. Tort.
It could be in tort. Yeah, what else? Punitive, that's a good one. That's a good one too. Yeah. I mean, so there are those opportunities. The one I always think of is constructive trust. That type of thing where, maybe somebody took your money, put a down payment on a house, the house appreciates and you get the difference in the value. Nothing wrong there. I mean, that can happen. These are all sorts of different situations. There's no particular reason that the wrongdoer should benefit. There's no reason they should keep it. And that is one of the good things about a constructive trust is that, as a legal fiction, it turns the wrongdoer into your trustee. And so trustees are supposed to do everything that's on, for your benefit. And if that's the case, then obviously they can't steal from you, even though that's how they got the faux title of a constructive trustor, as they call them. But they're now required to basically work on your behalf. And if they were so kind as to make a wise investment on your part, who are you to turn down the stock, the stock split? Who are you to turn down the fill in the blank? Speaking of stock splits, I was watching TV the other day, and I was watching a television show which had, and apparently the guest hosts are Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg. I was pretty impressed, actually. I thought to myself, oh, so we actually have finally found a use for television. That's good. Anyways, but I was kind of amazed at that. Anyways, kind of remarkable. Modern world we live in, I tell you. Okay, anyway. So we do have those situations. It's not as unusual as it seems, or as weird as it seems. That in many instances, a plaintiff actually can recover, more than they lost in remedy. It's not that weird. This can happen. Doesn't sound like it's supposed to, but it does. So with that said, disgorging the profits of the wrongdoers, we start with a pretty classic case, an old case that people still follow. This one is about personal property, right? So who's got Olwell versus Nye and Nissen Company? Nice 1946 case.
Do it. So,
Okay.
Olwell owned an egg washing machine that he left in apparently his own area, but an area that the defendant could access. And then the defendant decided to use it.
Yes.
And so he used it about once a week for 3.5 years. When plaintiff found out, he offered to sell it to him for half the price that it was in 1929. This is 1945 now, it's 3.5 years of being used. So that's $600 is what the plaintiff wanted, which was half of the original cost. A counteroffer of $50, which is probably what it was worth, after 16 years of use, something like $50 was probably, and that was refused. The court actually awarded more damages than the plaintiff, so probably some clever lawyer got involved at this point and made a different kind of demand from the court, or request, I should say. And the court came out with a very weird number of weeks, which I don't understand, but basically they said $10 a week for a period of 156 weeks by the statute of limitations. So basically they cut it off at 156 weeks due to the statute of limitations. I really don't get that, because it seems like if we could discuss that, I'd like that. But and so that brought it out to 1,560, and the court upholds this judgment, saying that the court held that plaintiff could recover the profit derived by the defendant from the use of the machine. The court further determined that the judgment, I think they upheld this. Yeah. That's basically, they sued, instead of bringing an action in court for a plevin or the amount of the machine, they sued in sumptuate and got a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how did he do that though? What was the magic trick that they kind of tell you in this case he had to do in order to do that? Because you can do that, but what's the legal kind of,
Get away his tort damage?
Right, can you weigh the tort damage and just say, oh, hell with that, I'm just gonna go into a sunset, which is a equitable, common count, and I'm just gonna sue you for the use instead. Can you do that?
Sure.
The answer, hell yeah. Strange but true. You don't have to stick with the legal, remedy just because there is one. You actually can't jump over to equity if in fact you prefer that remedy. And in this case, if you think about it, it's not a bad idea. It's kind of an odd case because it's a wartime case. Wartime cases tend to make kind of odd law at the same time, but for whatever reason, the plaintiff has sold the business to the defendant. Between the two of them, they decide that plaintiff can still store this egg washer, right, in part of the building. He's going to have it delivered someday. And then the war kind of comes along, and all of a sudden there's a scarcity of men, there's a scarcity of whatever else have you. And the defendant decides he wants to use the egg washer, doesn't ask anybody, just pulls it out and starts using it. That is kind of weird if you think about it. You did have a contract, you did agree. Even if you didn't have a contract, you knew it wasn't yours. So he's kind of a wrongdoer, right? There's not a whole lot of justification. It doesn't seem like very much, but it's, but there's no real justification for it. Plus, the other funny part about this case too, that may sound kind of odd, but this is the case that always reminds me though of one of the things that, hopefully you'll never hear this in law, but you will. One of your clients will do this someday. Whenever a client says to you, okay, you ready? Here's a life lesson to be learned at the beginning. When a client calls you up and asks you to do something that you don't think is exactly the right thing to do, whatever that means, and their justification is, but I'm only going to do it once, whatever you do not believe that. Because the first time it works, nothing's going to change, and they're going to keep doing it over and over and over again. Just so you know. This is actually how most businessmen get into trouble. They just cook the books once, right? So they can keep the stock price high or whatever else have you. And then they end up doing this year after year after year. That's actually exactly what Enron did. Enron started out with just this, we just got to make our numbers this, quarter. And then, 10 years later, all of a sudden everything's out of control because the entire company now is built on a fallacy. It's built on unreal numbers. It's built on, whatever else have you. And this case reminds me of it too. I'm sure this guy just in a funnier way, but he takes out the egg washer, right? And he says, I'll just use it this once, right? Or this week or whatever he did. And how long does he end up using it for?
3.5 years.
3.5 years. I doubt he started out with the idea he was going to use it for 3.5 years. He could have, but I just doubt it, so.
So, how does that, statute of limitations work on this case? Because it seems like the newer should have known pops out, but they don't really go into it. What am I missing here? Like, why is it limited to 156 weeks or $1,560? Does that make sense?
Sure.
I mean, it seems like that's already kind of excessive, but why? So, is he backdating the statute of limitations? Like saying, you can claim anything, because he didn't know about any of this. It wasn't like I should be limited to the point where I discovered it, right? Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, there's two ways you can look at this actually, because remember, he does it for 3.5 years. So when exactly would you say that the statute ran? 3.5 years ago, or
Not at all.
after 3.5 years?
It doesn't run until you discover it.
Or until it's discovered or discoverable, or you should have discovered it.
Right.
You certainly had no reason to not discover it. So
To me, it seems like a weird case because usually, I guess, so what they're doing is that they're saying that when you discovered it, we're gonna give you 2 years from then, right? That's what they're saying. Okay, that's fair
why
enough.
not?
That makes sense.
Short law.
It does.
Yeah.
But even though they're in equity, I don't know, it just is goofy, because it like, does the statute of limitations apply to a substitute under statute? Is it
Probably 2 years. I mean, for most torts, it's 2 years.
okay,
So I think they just went with the tort statute.
okay.
And again, remember that this case, even though he changes, he goes into a subset, you can't go from 0 into, you have to go through law first before you get to damages or changing. You have to ascertain that the normal damages won't suffice. And the problem is if you look at normal damages, I mean, in a case like this, what are they? I mean, what would he get? Normal damage on, for an item that actually is just a little older. You know what I'm saying? I mean, why can't he just have the item back? He doesn't want it, right? He doesn't need it anymore. This is kind of a weird case, because it's like, all right, we'll give you my egg washer back. Okay. You can give it back to him, and then he can say, but I want to be paid for the use you had of it when you shouldn't have. Or you can even just say, I don't want it. What value to me is it now that you've actually put 3.5 more miles, so to speak. That's like 12,000 miles a year. 12,000. You put 36,000 miles on my car, man. And you want to pay me for pre-36,000 miles? How does that sound to you? I'm not doing that. Would any of you do that? Yeah, I'll buy it now that you blew out the engine. It's not of any value anymore. Of course, the egg washer is probably not used anymore, right? Moving into a new era of technology, to be sure. So lots of interesting ins and outs of this case, but very clever guy though. He jumps into, very clever lawyer, like you said, he jumps into he figures that his best bet of getting the best recovery for his client is in fact to jump into equity and get an equitable remedy. And sure enough, he's right. Of course, he gets challenged on it, goes up the food chain, but the food chain indeed comes back in his favor. And interesting case that way. So what do we take from this case as lawyers or something of that line is, again, when it comes to remedies, it really helps to know all the remedies that are available to you, or things that are available, or how you would get to things that might be available to you. Still to this day, I've never been amazed at how many lawyers I've known who really don't understand how to get into equity. And that's a mistake, because if you don't know how to get into equity, you don't really even know the basic rules. What happens if somebody comes into your office and tells you a story similar to this? And if you don't really understand what's going on, you're going to probably say something like, well, there's no contract, so. you know? So that's not good at all. I mean, that's bad. But even if you know what maybe you do ascertain that this is type of a tort, right? Because he's got the item, right? So he's taken dominion over it. So something along those lines, right? All right, but this guy was smart enough to know that he can go after, some version of quantum merit in this case, some version of restitution in this case, right? Not the value of the item itself, which is not worth very much, but the value of the service to the defendant of this item. I think that's pretty genius, quite frankly. I think that this guy was pretty smart and really on top of his game. Because I'm not being facetious. I'm just saying most attorneys that I have known over the years wouldn't think about this, wouldn't think about doing this. So, I would, because I was always more than happy to get into equity. I'm very happy if a judge would give me an equitable remedy most of the time. They usually work out pretty good.
So do you have to, when you demand you make a claim, write your thing out, do you have to bring the tort and the equity remedy? You have to bring both. For you say, I make a claim for conversion, and then you say, and for assumption. I think that's how you say it.
Yeah. All right. I would actually even say, and for the equitable remedies, so I would actually put that into my.
Right, but you would actually make a whole, like what are the elements of assumption? Because everything else we have is clear,
Off the top of my head, I don't know. Assumptions when you're in the. I think the thing is technically you're in the rightful possession, is that right, of the item itself, but you do something that interferes with the owner's right of possession, it's something like that. So it's a little bit different than replevin. Replevin is just give me back my thing. Assumption, I think, is when you actually have it, and you actually have a legal right to it. Is that correct? Something like that. They did agree he could leave it there, so I think that changes the analysis a little bit.
Well, but in all honesty, you would bring this under one of the California common counts, right?
Oh yeah.
That's how you would actually get into it, right?
That's the best way, yeah. Well, I would, definitely put that up there. I would always put at the bottom replevin, not mine, and things like that. There's nothing wrong with saying that. One time we tried to replevy a copying machine. I thought that was pretty funny. Guy wanted his copying machine back. Okay, sounds good to me.
Well, it's not
Go with replevin. Why not? What the hell, man? And again, the beauty about getting into equity, it's a little bit of a coin toss, don't get me wrong, because, what are you asking the judge to do? Something that's fair. Are there really any other rules? The answer is no, there aren't any rules. So, the only real trick, quote unquote, is figuring out what the right number is. Right? That's the problem in equity, is it can be problematic to figure out what the right number is. But on the other hand, that's why we have things like restitution and quantum merit, because they give us a basis to count, right? They're not, quantum merit and restitution for the most part aren't really different. It's just a different basis of calculating the money that you expect to receive. Quantum merit is for value of services and restitution is for value of goods rendered.
But I know it's hard coming up with the right number, but isn't when you say you come up with all the numbers, like you want to bring up, quantum merit and all that?
Well, if you need it, yeah. If you don't need it, if you do actually have damages and you want the damages, that's fine.
But do you have to list the damages you want, but in every form you could possibly want them in? If you want
something. Well, but you can't get both. You can only get one.
I know, but you have to list all of them anyway, right? You can only get one.
Well, if you get a remedy at law, then you're done. You can't get any equitable remedies because the one at law sufficed. if the one at law won't suffice, that's why you want to jump over to equity, so you can get the bigger number.
Like with the egg washing case, say,
That's the short
but
version.
like with the egg washing case, you would, on the paper and on the demand, you would have to ask for everything, right? Either the purchase of the machine, the rental of the machine, or any of the profits. So you have to bring up all the different ways you'd want to get reimbursed. Or
In your complaint?
yeah, your complaint. And when you're asking for
Might, well, you can just, sometimes what you can do is you can just pray for it, right? And then it's this, or in the alternative, this.
Okay.
You can do something.
But some of those, if you don't use it, you lose it.
I mean, you can't get them all is what I'm saying. You don't just give them a laundry list. It's like, but if you want to say, and by the way, if you won't do this, will you do this?
Yeah, I know you can't get them all, but do you have to give them a laundry list of what you would accept? You know?
Well, it's,
Like, so it's almost like if you don't bring it up, you lose it, right, or something like that.
Well, I remember in this case,
not so much.
in this
You
case,
can also say according to proof at trial.
they got more than what they requested.
Yeah, but.
Yeah, this case, see, what's interesting about this case is they got more.
They got more.
The judge
so
saw that.
During section 371 is the common account for goods and services rendered.
Okay,
Just, if we're putting one of the elements.
okay. Sounds like it, yeah. Is that it? Okay.
Yeah.
But did the guy have to ask for like the rental thing that they got, or is that something the court just gave him for themselves?
What's that?
No, I think he asked for that, didn't he?
Is that something he had to ask for, like the lawyer, or is that something the court gave him?
Right, so what you're requesting is the amount of services rendered.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
they came up with a
So,
number.
and, they take your stuff or your services, either one, goods or services or things, and they, what you want is the value of of their what do you just said, you want,
Yeah, you want the
what you
value.
created out of it, yeah.
But did he also have to ask for like the sale value and all these other values?
I think that,
Like from a practical point of view, right? Like,
I mean, the funny part is it's really driven by the facts, and it really depends what kind of case you have. If there's going to be, different theories which are going to have different kind of, payoffs that may be wildly different, you might want to suggest some, alternatives. that
So
you
just the
would-
highest one and then some alternatives you'd be okay with.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, in the alternative, if you won't give us this and give us this, in the alternative, if you won't give us this and give us this, that's been known to happen. I mean, you can do that. That's fine. I mean, I was just right according to proof at trial. That's what I used to do, almost always, as I recall. Very rare when I wouldn't.
Then you won't lose any of the recoveries.
Well, I'd always say that I want to see what the discovery says. I want to see how much money they're really hiding, because most of the time when you actually file it's funny. I was just saying this to a lawyer a freshly minted lawyer the other day. He was asking me a somewhat similar question to what you're asking me now, so that's good. But I said, you don't be too crazy in your complaints, because when you enter into discovery, you usually don't know all the facts by any stretch of imagination, nor do you have to. That's not necessary. All you have to do is make your basic case to get into court. And there's nothing, I don't know anybody, if you were to say to somebody, yeah, I want to get into court so I can get into discovery, I already got a prima facie case, right? I don't know the extent of it yet. I mean, that's not crazy. That's not crazy at all. I mean, that's not any kind of, frivolous suit just because you don't know everything up front. That's not true. I mean, a lot of lawyers, and if you're smart, you figure you got to do something you got to do, right? During discovery, they give you a long enough time for it, and that's one of the things you do. One of the other things that you want to concentrate on during discovery is, you spend a lot of, if you're, again, I can't say everything for every lawyer, but you will spend a lot of time on what you want, why, and even possibly where you'll get it from, right? Because just remember, you can't get blood from a turnip. It's pretty hard. Can't say it can't be done, but you gotta find a blood turnip. There aren't too many of those around. As I was wont to say when I was still practicing law, a turnip is a turnip is a turnip is a turnip. So, yeah, don't sue. Don't, I mean, my personal opinion, again, whatever you want to do, but you know, if your client wants a judgment so they can hang it on a wall, do you think that's your best client? That's kind of weird to me. But,
It pays up front, sure.
well, but you know, if they do say yes, you say, well, then it's double, because there's got to be something wrong. So you need to double your fees like right away. Maybe that'll scare them away. I'm not sure, but anyways, with that said. Just remember, you know, if you're doing it for revenge, they're doing it for any kind of justification that sounds like they're, you know, kind of, what's the word for it? They're, you know, for the good of all. It's like, okay, problem is now I'm charging you triple, because that's what that kind of indication costs. It's not what law's really for, to be honest with you. So it's to do right or wrong.
Can you tell it to clients straight up, like, well, for this, I'm gonna have to charge you double my usual rates?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Get straight to the race, like, well, for this kind of education. So
That's what you want to do. Absolutely can do that as long as you're upfront with them.
Yeah, and you just
I used to have a I used to have a sliding scale just depending on what it was, because there were some areas of the law that I had a lot more knowledge about, and I knew I'd be going a lot quicker, right? So I didn't have to, you know, to charge a lot of money. So, whereas there were other areas of the law that I knew a lot of it, not that I didn't know it, but I knew a lot of it was just going to be very sort of more meticulous work, and that would take time, and so I would charge less money. I mean, that's not unusual at all. That's what insurance companies do. Whatever else have you, but that's, you know, you don't have to have one price for everybody. That's not necessary at all. I don't know of any requirement that you charge all of your clients exactly the same. So I've never heard that.
Like, so just have a little scale in front of them as they do more of it, just kind of just sliding it from your
I've never heard of
So
that.
like 100 to like 400, just kind of slide it over.
As they talk more and more.
Well, you could do what a friend of mine used to do. Someone would say, what's your fee? He'd say, let's ask the Ouija board. Ouija board, how much should I? I don't think he did that. He told me he did. I'm not sure he did. Ouija board said you did it. Get out. Sorry. Get out. I don't know. But no, that's, you know, but these are things that do matter. You know, I mean, they really do. So, I mean, I had an enormous amount of information about copyright law as it applied to musical compositions. And so my rates were $300 an hour. If you came to me for employment law, it was $150 an hour, because it's just different. You know, with copyright law, it was like that. You know, you usually knew the answer before they asked the question. It was usually one letter. So, you know, what am I going to do, right? Because I charge $300 and it's a minimum 1 hour. Otherwise, I didn't want to do it. There's nothing wrong with that. Whereas with employment law, you know, it's a lot of stuff. You know, you're doing a lot more research. You're doing a lot more appearances, the whole thing. You know, and so you drop your price, but the reason why is because you know it's going to keep going, and if you're going to look out and see the people around you, right, in the same area, you'll find that that's why they drop their prices low. So if you want to compete, you have to do things like that. So anyway, so that's how I did it. It was, for many years, IP 300, employment law 150, and I don't know, I never got nobody ever complained at all. So I usually would complain to them because they wouldn't pay me. That's about it. So, but yeah, that's good things to think about. You know, like, how am I going to be competitive? How am I going to, if I do have an advantage of some sort of knowledge? And to me, the knowledge it's not so much knowledge, it's just that you'll go so fast. You know, it's kind of a problem. I mean, at one point you were asking me a copyright problem, and I look it up, and it's this. All right, what do I charge you for that? You know, I mean, you could have went to the guy down the street, he'd say, oh, I don't know, I got it, you know. I don't know much about copyrights. I gotta ask this guy, then I gotta talk to this guy, then I gotta research this, and I gotta do that. Month and that. 300 an hour. Okay, well, that person just ran you up an enormous amount of money, probably. Whereas I would tell you, okay, it's this, because I've done it before. So, of course, that person's not gonna stay in business, you are, which is also valuable. But, these are the things that you'll have to think about, what will see, I think you guys are kind of lucky out here, because you don't have the same kind of, rapid competition that you have in Los Angeles with a market like that. Where everybody is, the big companies want to take you, they want to take everybody, right? They want to sort of give all sorts of loss leader stuff to people and stuff like that. I mean, they tell you they don't, but they do. I'm just telling you right now. They would rather take a client and then have them at less than they would maybe normally want. And if that just so happens to put out a couple of people like who are independent, practitioners or not, they're perfectly happy with that. So do not be fooled. Whereas out here, and again, it's nothing personal, but whenever someone says to me, Coachella Valley, well, let me put it this way, when they say big firm in Coachella Valley in the same sentence, I'm kind of like, there's big firms in the Coachella Valley.
Really only Walter Clark, but that's not even big.
It just has a lot of advertising.
Yeah.
That's what I got one for.
Someone had this fridge magnets on my fridge. I've never had one, so through my mom, there's a ultra fridge magnet. I don't know. He's everywhere.
But these are all rational things that you should, be thinking about. Just not that I want to get too much into that today, or actually this ever with you. Although if you do wish my, information on such, you're welcome to ask. But you are also unless you're going to work for a firm or someone else, you're going to have to be businessmen. And there are rules that have, lawyers are businessmen. They're in business. And there are rules how that works and how it doesn't. And strangely enough, they're not that different than how the rules in the real world work. It's not, and a lot of them are very easy to follow. People who think because you're in the law, all of a sudden you can do a bad job in line just because you haven't been disbarred lately, you're doing great. Okay, I've known attorneys like that, I haven't got any complaints this week. Still driving that Mercedes. Of course, I haven't paid on the lease in 10 months. I'm sure they'll come get it at some point. So you guys think I'm laughing. I know plenty of lawyers that do that. I think they're out of their minds, quite frankly. Or, hey, how about this for an idea? How many of you thought about customer service? You might want to think about that. A lot of lawyers don't. I would say, arguably, when you're at John Dolan, you don't have to worry too much about customer service because your customers are going to die, first of all, and they need you. But for the most part, unless you're doing something like multiple, body murders, you might want to think about your customer service skills, right? Things of that nature. You all, by now, must realize you're going to have to grow a second set of patients. You all know that, right? Once you're actually out there. You too. I'm looking at you.
About me?
Yeah, you too. You're going to have to grow a second set of patients too.
I have patience.
Do you? Really?
He has patients just one paying him.
I'm not going to. Why are you doing it?
I worked in retail and customer service for years.
Did you really?
Oh God! What my parents owned.
What did you do?
My parents owned a business since I was 1, and so I grew up in that. And I run their Facebook page as the customer service person, and then I worked in banking before I got into the law firm.
Yeah,
and I only threatened to call the cops on someone once.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I mean,
that's not bad.
And it was in Desert Hot Springs. So I have patience.
Okay.
I have more patience than most people, unfortunately.
Okay. Good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Very good, very good. Yeah. So anyways, these are all things that, again, you're not just going to super think about them today. But these are things you really should think about. So. Okay, okay, anything else about Allwell? Okay, again, not fairly complex case in and of itself, but. All right, let's move forward then. Let's see what we got. Now, look at it, hold on a second. So they do, here they have a description, I thought there was, it's a description of the sunset on 681 under 5A, in case you want to see that. See, I know it just, another thing in here, that's where it is. So yeah, sunset is a, yeah, and they're all different.
Thank you.
Oh, that's interesting, okay.
But you can just sue them both, right?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Okay. Because it
I mean,
keeps
if
saying
not,
waive
then
the
this.
tort
Right,
and sue in a substitute. We'll bring both.
right, I mean, you're the master of your own,
Right. Of my own pleading.
of your own pleading, so why not? Yeah, I don't see why not.
Right.
Especially in that case, because the, usually you can plead in the alternative, particularly if the remedy is different.
Mhm.
So, yeah. That's one of the,
Well, you can plead in the alternative if the facts are different. I mean.
oh, well, sure you can. Yeah, but I'm just saying, but also if the remedies are different, that's also a basis to actually plead in the alternative. Because remember, you don't have to just say it's this, you can plead in the alternative. I mean, you just can. So, it always makes you know, if not this, then this, you know, but makes perfectly good sense if you're a lawyer. It's like, well, you know, I think it's this, but it could be this, maybe it's both. So maybe I'll want to pick the one with the better remedy. That's fine too. I personally have no problem with that. I mean, it's pretty smart, to be honest with you. Oh, here's a pretty cool case. I actually like this one. Good old Ninth Circuit case, no less. Mayor Brewing Company versus Fleischmann Distilling Corp.
So Fleischmann's had a trademark about under a black and white, but it was for Scotch. And then Meyer decided to create a beer also called Black and White. And so Fleischmann sued for trademark infringement. And they asked the court to do an accounting of profits for their, so that because under the theory of trademark infringement, you can get, there's the theory that you can get not only the damages caused by you, but also the profits caused by that trademark infringement.
That will be covered.
And so the court, the issue basically was whether an accounting of the profits was reasonable under the circumstances, because there was a split in theories that in order to get this accounting, you had to show that there was a competition between the trademarks. And they said here that they were sold in two different markets, and one was beer, one was whiskey, and there was no confusion over the products. Therefore, there shouldn't have been a trademark infringement, and they shouldn't have been able to get an accounting. And the court basically said that the competition aspect that was kind of the fight is irrelevant. They said that basically, as long as there's a possibility that they could confuse the one product for the other product, that there's some kind of a wrongdoing based on that trademark infringement. And as long as there's the possibility for one person to pick up a black and white beer and think that it's distilled by the black and white Scotch company, and then they hate the beer so much that they never buy it again, that's enough to show that that there's enough of a confusion with trademark for them to be able to get an accounting of the profits. And so they were able to get the accounting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, not bad. Good. All right, so again, not a terribly complex case. Have you guys had intellectual property yet?
Yeah.
But we had to.
You did, right?
Mhm.
Oh, okay, you had that, right?
Well, this is last semester.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it was a half semester. It was a 1 semester course that was split between that and legal research and writing.
Okay,
It
cool.
was kind of sad.
Yeah, we were.
Okay. All right. All muffle waffle aside, let's. Okay. Anyway, so I used to. I haven't done it lately, but I used to teach intellectual property at UCSB, believe it or not, many years ago, and I actually used to use this case as an example. If I could find the paperwork ever, which probably is in a box somewhere in a box in a storage unit that I probably forgot about. It's been auctioned off most likely. But anyways, with that said, I used to have the advertising from this case. Back in those days, the whiskey was called Black and White. It's even around today. It's still here. You can see it, Black and White, still a fairly popular whiskey. They used to have their big thing was they would have these, they'd have two dogs. These two Scotties,
Oh,
a
yeah.
black Scotty and a white Scotty. So they were very famous. Everybody knew it, And along comes this idea. This guy says, well, okay, but that's hard liquor. Okay, that's, hard liquor. And he wants to do a beer called Black and White, right? And Black and White in and of itself is a rather innocuous term, isn't it? I mean, lots of things can be called black and white. It's nothing about, there's nothing, I don't want to get too much into it, but it is kind of it's a very interesting case when you look at it, because the thing is, there's nothing black or white about Scotch. So it doesn't describe any particular desirable quality of the product itself, and it's just such a generic term. I mean, black and white just pretty much stands for, in many ways, it stands for kind of the theory of maybe older, like when everything is black and white, so people use it for that. People use the term black and white just to say it's clear cut. So it's kind of an open term. Black and white Scotch was very, very popular at the time. And if you keep going through trademark law, what you find is that the actual standard for infringement is whether the average consumer would be confused as to the source or the origin. Well, if you look at the sort of if you look at sort of from the technical trademark sort of perspective, it seems like the two are fair enough apart. I mean, it's a very
both alcohol. That's the problem.
Yeah, under the code, the Lanham Act, they do break things into different classes, though. And strangely enough, hard liquor and beer are in their own classes, basically, which is good. It spoke well to the persons who thought they could do the beer. But see, the problem, though, is that when you have something that's so popular, like that Scotch was, and still is to this great day, I mean, if you're a Scotch drinker, everyone knows it. The problem is how do you get any product that's even remotely close, to particularly beer, that people aren't going to possibly, and it's not even, you don't have to show, this is what's weird about trademark law, a lot of people never realize this, should you ever do trademark law. You don't have to actually show any consumer confusion. You just have to show a likelihood. Like, Your Honor. So, and the other interesting too is what you ask in the case like this, and again, it's kind of an interesting question, is because obviously if you're black and white beer, you're saying, oh, we didn't even think about them, right? All right, so why did you pick that name? Better have a good reason, right? I mean, you better have some reason. And also, I see that's the thing is I don't know how far that would go, right? I mean, think of it even before a judge. And you're saying, yeah, we never thought of black and white Scotch, even though we see it on every back magazine in the United States right now. So,
Especially if you're an alcohol distributor. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of it. Listen.
yeah. Oh. So so it's interesting because again, from a technical viewpoint, this was not a bad case. This is why I used to use this case, because I could run through the 8 infringement elements. That's why they make a big deal about only being sold in Rouse too, because it's channels as well, right? It's the channels they go through. If you have 2 products, but ne'er do they cross, right? Then what consumer confusion is there? You can't be confused. They don't cross.
Yeah.
So it'd be very, very difficult at that level to pull that one off as well, I think. So that's why they mentioned, by the way, in the case that it's only sold at Rouse, because they're saying the channels are different. So again, they're trying to lessen the impact. But at the same time, you know, I'll just say that is you better have a good reason for picking that, other than the idea that, you know, damn well people are going to associate a very high quality product in this case, right? I mean, that's the thing about black and white Scotch, is that it's considered very high quality. Right? This beer, you know, I don't know, is probably just another homebrew beer, right? If anything, which probably doesn't really super speak of quality, nor in fact do I think beer even generally speaks of quality. Even when you have quality beer, it's not quality beer, it's just beer that's better than other beer. And there's never been a better beer ever made than Newcastle Brown anyway, so I don't know why they bother, quite frankly. It's about the best of the best it ever will be. Just my opinion.
No, that's good, yeah.
A good beer.
Good beer.
That's the one beer that if you say, do you want a beer? No. Newcastle, yes. That's like the one I'll do it for.
Somehow I've completely missed black and white Scotch. I've never had it.
The Scotch?
Yeah.
No way. Really?
And I've had all kinds of Scotch.
I'm gonna go into Total Wine and More tonight.
Honestly, not that I'm suggesting you go out and buy alcohol, but I'm suggesting that you
Go out and buy
actually
But
pretty damn good.
it's only like $25 a bottle. It can't be that good.
Well, no, but that was the beauty of it. It's not great. Okay, you're not talking about these, you know, off the charts. But for the money, it's just unbelievably good Scotch. It's just really, really, it's you know the solid of the solid. It's good. I mean, it's really very drinkable, and people, generally speaking, like it, and it's really good. I mean, I used to think that was a very good Scotch.
That's the bottle green though.
Hmm?
It's called black and white, but the bottle's green.
Yeah, the bottle's actually green
Yeah.
on top of everything else. But the ads were great.
Is there something about the light?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a filter.
It helps it to not skunk as easily.
Yeah, for sure. And but but at least at this time of year, seeing this case too. I mean, it's not as big as it used to be. But back then, it was just huge. I mean, there was just I'm telling you, the back cover of every magazine had a black and white Scotch ad on. I started seeing it me anyway. So yeah, they were really riding high at one time, and they're still around, and still have a good reputation. So there you go. Anyways, with that said, so very interesting case. The funny part is I used to go through all the elements with my class, and at the very end, you know, the funny part was we'd say, you know, everything being equal, we still think that's why you did it. You know, because it just seemed like it. You really couldn't get around that. And I had a picture of the bottle too, of the black and white
Beer.
the beer too, and it had a bulldog on it. By the way, black.
But you didn't have a dog.
It was black and white, and it didn't have a dog on it. It was a bulldog. So a very cool looking bulldog, to say the least. But so you see, it was kind of, you put them back to back, and you're like, It really was quite a thing, because there's lots of good and bad, but at the end of the day, it is what it is, and you couldn't get around it. You know, it's like, and they had, I am going to assume in this as well, that there was no particular reason that they chose black and white for the title.
Now, can you just straight up trademark something like that, or is that way too generic?
Oh, it depends.
Yeah. This is a trademark.
Yeah.
It's not really a trademark case, is it? It's a.
Yeah, it's a trademark.
It's a trademark case.
Yeah.
Well, then why aren't they just out the door if you trademark a name like that?
Yeah.
Oh, never mind.
That would take me about an entire class to explain that to you.
Okay.
But yeah, you can definitely, trademarks are, they're not as, the analysis is
It's far more detailed, right?
it's very detailed, Yeah,
Okay.
you have to start by breaking it into many, many different categories and things of that nature, and then you break it again, and then you actually kind of figure it out. Because remember, trademarks technically, for better or for worse, are like monopolies, and so you can't. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to give one person black and white, and so you have to start breaking these things up. But then again, if you make up a word, something that's totally made up, maybe you should have more of a monopoly. I mean, after all, you made up the word. You couldn't possibly, what chance, if you're the only person on the planet using that word, what are the possibilities of?
Like Google.
Yeah, something like that really is kind of interesting that way. Although Google actually is a word, but anyways.
Oh, yeah.
It means, it's a number.
Yeah.
Actually, that's above an exajoule or something like that. So, but nobody, actually uses it.
But it's also spelled differently.
A search engine is completely different than any other use of it, so it actually made a lot of sense in one way. Anyways, back to the thing though, is what is very, very interesting, and this is true of intellectual property, is you have an enormous range of recovery. It's just something that you just have to study it. If you want to do this type of law and things like that. It's not just, there's many, many different types of ways of getting your money back and more. That's not unusual at all. Because the problem is in intellectual property, not only do we want you to be compensated, but we want other people to quit it. So how do you do that? I mean, think of it this way. Let's say that, you had a trademark and somebody infringed on it, and then the only thing that you could lose was whatever their damage was, okay? Chances are is that you're gonna get to keep all your profit then. Oh, I'll just give it back, here's the damage, and we get to keep the profit. That's probably what would happen. How does that stop piracy? As a matter of fact, it promotes it, doesn't it? I mean, who cares? If I'm gonna make $300,000 and only gonna have to pay $150,000, okay, there ain't no efficient breach. Is what I'm saying in intellectual property, and that's why. And so they give you all these different types of things you can get. The first thing they give you is statutory damages. If you really can't figure it out, statutory damages. Copyright infringement, $150,000. I don't know, it's worth I don't know what it's worth. I want $150,000. Can you do that? The answer is in copyright law, yes, because you can do that. It's 150,000 statutory damages. He did it on purpose. It was willful. I told him not to use it, and he used it anyways. Can you treble the damages because it's willful? Yes. So let me see. That's the last time I looked. That's $450,000. And I haven't even thought about quantum meruit. I haven't thought about restitution. I haven't thought about nothing. These are just statutory damages. So if I can prove those two facts, he infringed and he did it on purpose. Okay, so I'm already looking at a good recovery. Now, whether you're going to get that, that's another question. Just but there you go. You start there. Then you go ahead and you say profit, right? You say plus my profit. Okay, so on top of that, can you get their profit? The answer is yes. Can you get both their profit and can you get Ralph's profit?
Apparently.
That one. And the answer is probably. Certainly ask. I mean, not, but you might ask. Now, do you think that's enough? Does anyone here in this room right now think that's not enough? Well, I did that law and I'm telling you it's not. We want even more and we want our damage. Okay, so what's our damage? Who can figure out what our damage is? And they actually talk about it in this case. You get your damage too.
The court may enter judgment according to circumstances of the case for any sum above the amount found as actual damage not exceeding 3 times such amount. But then, that's all it says. In assessing damages,
Yeah.
the court basically has wide discretion.
What might be damaged though in a case like this? Because I can think of 2 different ones I'm going to ask for too.
Lost sales.
Lost sales, very good. I think that during this time period, because of his infringement, we would have also sold this, this, and this. As long as I can prove it, I can ask for that. And I can also ask for
Loss of
more
reputation.
damage. Very good. But in what we don't really call it loss of reputation. In trademark law, we call it loss of goodwill. In other words, why my mark is valuable is because everybody knows that they like black and white Scotch when they see the logo, right? That's why logos are so valuable, because as we say, they talk about the, it gives you the source of origin, right? And the goodwill inherent therein, which means, and you like it. If you like it, then therefore when you see the label, or whatever it is, that's, you keep buying that. That's why, a really, really good logo is just, I don't know how much they're worth. They're just worth an enormous amount of money. And so that's called goodwill. And so in fact, if your product has damaged my goodwill, I still got to put a number on it, right? That's a little hard. But, can I ask for it? Hey, man, this is IP, of course. Can I ask for damage to my DNA, genomes, and synapses DNA? Sure, man, this is IP. I don't know. I'm just saying, though. So you have a great number of different options, partly because it's intellectual property, it's ethereal, it's intangible, it's hard to protect, right? It's out there all around us, so it's hard. But also on top of compensating, in the case of trademarks, they're really for businessmen, where they're, sweat, pain, and hard work of building up all that interest in it, / then giving them, making sure that we don't want counterfeiters, we don't want piracy. These are bad things that actually are a drag on our economy. They create a black market that sort of skirts the economy, right? That's why black markets are bad, because they don't pay tax, they don't do anything, for the general public good. So, anyway, so can you get all those? And the answer is yes. And so that's what they're actually talking about here in this case. They're just sort of giving you this big range, some of the theories why. And again, if this was an IP class and we were doing trademarks, just would be kind of interesting to see why at the end of the day, although it doesn't sound like it when you first think about it, by the end of the day, every student's always going, oh yeah, everyone knows they did that. So, that's the way it is. Of course, I don't think I ever had a student that hadn't drank black and white Scotch, so on top of everything else, they all knew it. So maybe now it's a little bit not as hot a brand as it was, but back then it was spooky. All right, so we good? Another thing you want to notice in here is when you do a complaint for copyright infringement, you always ask for an accounting, right? You always ask for the equitable remedy of an accounting. Well, you want to know how much their sales are. Right? Now you know why, because you can ask for those damages. So you have to ask. You ask the judge. It's like, because it's an equitable remedy, you're asking them or telling them that they have to put together, an accounting for it. So that's why you see that as you do IP. You'll see them say, and an equitable accounting. That's what it means, because you want to see what their sales were. Then you can figure out what your lost sales were, and you can figure out what your profit was, both of which are recoverable. Yeah. All right. Anything else about that case? Okay, good. Move forward. If you do look at number 5 here, note 5 on page 688. It tells you about all the different remedies for infringement of intellectual property. Again, if you do this law or want to do this law, you must know this, okay? Otherwise you can't do it, because you have to be able to ask for everything you're entitled to. So this would not be optional, okay? You need to at least know it at a starting point in this book. So otherwise you just can't do it, okay? Very interesting stuff, how it's all different too. How they're all different. And anyway, because I really like this stuff. Like I said, I did copyright and trademarks. And I would have known most of this for many, many years. So. Okay. Let's see, what time is it? Yeah, let's go for one more. How does that sound?
So this is
Sheldon versus Metro Golden Iron.
okay, so I read this case like 4 or 5 times because like I kind of threw me off a little bit, but what I think is happening is this movie company, the plaintiffs, they ripped off this lady's poem, or not poem, her play.
Yeah.
And then this play, they made a movie with it. This movie's raising a lot of money. And now the judge, when they're trying to determine how much to pay back the defendant, they said, well, we're going to allow you guys to keep 25%, and we're going to give her the remainder of all the profits. Now these plaintiffs are saying, well, that's not fair. You should only pay her what she would have gotten if she had sold us the play in the first place for like $30,000. Or also you're giving her all the profits that, should have gone to the actors and everyone else, and you can't do that. You can't be dividing up the profits like that.
Okay.
And the court said, well, no, there's actually a very clear statute that kind of says at the end there, you can give her all the profits, or in lieu of the damages and profits, such damages as to the court shall be just. So the court does have discretion as to how to divvy up the profits between the parties. And in this case, they said, hey, we gave you 25%. You did something wrong. You should be happy for that. It pretty much affirmed that decision that you pay the later 75% of all the profits for the movie, you keep 25% for your troubles, and that's the only case.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I got out of it. Like that, the court can kind of allocate profits to wherever it sees fit.
Okay. Again, here we are. We're in copyright now. Yes. And we're talking about infringement of a play. Okay, so we're definitely in copyright. Dishonored Lady, which became the picture Lady Linton. And I can't begin to tell you how many cajillions of these kind of cases there are.
Oh, the Matrix was a big one, right?
Well, the Matrix is a little bit different though, because the problem with the Matrix was, if I understand, the problem with the Matrix is that, first of all, the concept of the Matrix was not invented by the Matrix. Okay, it was invented, quote unquote, or at least there is another example of that type of world and theory in a Japanese anime called The Ghost in the Shell. So it's not like they made that up. Now, the problem they also had as well with the Matrix is that, and you see this a lot, is that, and they did show it, that, and again, you have to know about infringement law, but that another person had already given them a script. That
Was that lady that got her billions, right?
Yeah, which basically became the Matrix, although it was uncredited to her. And so again, here we have a situation where, to find infringement of copyright, you need to have copying, illegal copying, and access. That's it. That's all you have to show. So in other words, for instance, copying, right? How do you think you show copying?
Civil rings.
Does it look like this person was going to copy? I mean, that's literally what they do. I'm really not kidding. They just put the two pieces together and they say, is it possible that this person could have copied from this because there's enough material here that looks similar? Short version, does it look like this person saw this? Sure. Okay, check box number 1. That's the easy box. Almost everyone makes that one. Go to box number 2. Was there any illegal copying? Now that's a different question. Very different question.
That would be the easy one.
That's actually kind of hard.
Okay.
Yeah, strange but
When it's
true.
illegal.
Well, because you can copy a lot of stuff.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff in life that you can copy from other people. The problem is there's some stuff you can't, and that would be the illegal copying, right? And so, for instance, we have let's say, for instance, we stuck with The Matrix. Well, there's already a movie that already sort of had that same theory, a lot of the same theories in it. Again, it came out well before The Matrix ever came out. So now you're claiming that, they're copying from you, but who did you copy it from? Well, that's not illegal. If it's something that, something that you copied from somebody else, and now you're suing down. That makes no sense. That's not illegal copying. That's something that's now probably in the public domain. Plus, there's tons of stuff that's in the public domain right now, right? Do you think you can, I mean, you know, I'm not to move over, but it makes a lot more sense to do movies, which takes all night. But let's say in music, it's like, do you think that there's certain kind of idioms of rock and roll that you can't copyright? Well, of course. I mean, if that was true, then, you know, Chuck Berry would own every copyright in the world. He'd sue everybody because he was the first guy that played 3 chords together with a rock beat. That becomes like what's called an idiom, right? It's just something that becomes part of the sort of the repertory that everybody knows and that everybody gets the right to use. Now, if there's some specific lyrics, that's a little different, right? Or if there's some specific twist to it, that might be different. But the idioms of the same. For movies, it's like boy meets girl, girl meets boy, boy kills girl, whatever you want. But there's lots of ways that these idioms go. You can't copyright those. You can't copyright stories about boats. You can't, you know, you can't do that. You have to be able to copyright something that's unique, something that, you know, is unique to your vision, that you embodied in a very unique, expressive way.
Okay, so Hallmark would be out of business.
Yeah, I mean, yes. Yes, there you go. And so, so it's actually a lot of times that's really hard to prove. And of course, a lot of little tiny differences, that's not going to help. You know, I mean, it just,
It doesn't make you bring your case unless
it's pretty hard.
you could prove that. You'd be like, I don't know.
No, that really, well, let me just say you're right. You are. I mean, that's the one that's hard to prove. Because there's always going to be countervailing evidence on the other side.
Right.
That's pretty hard. But the third one that it's not hard to prove or not prove, it just is or is not, is access. Because if you want to sue something, if you're claiming that somebody sued you, copied from you, doesn't it just make sense that they had to have had some access to it? I mean, if they didn't have the access to it, how did they copy you? I mean, I had a case, which I did not take, of course, because I did it right away, but I still remember this case where this guy came to me and he had a tape. He had a cassette tape, and he could prove that he had recorded this song on a certain day. Got it? Certain day, certain year, certain time. And I swear to you, it really was. There was a song that came out not too long thereafter, within a year after he had put that on tape. And I would swear to you that that person had heard that tape. If I just heard the two. If I heard the two, I would swear it was just, the chorus was eerily similar. It was just weird. And he said, so I want to sue so-and-so, who was the person that actually put out the song. And I said, okay, copying. Sounds good. These two choruses are eerily, similar.
Mhm.
I'm looking good. It sounds to me like, yes, you did hear that and did rip off something that didn't sound exactly like something else. So that's a good start, right? And I said, all right, but here's, what have you done with this? Because I had assumed that he had sent, that he was a songwriter, so he was sending these tapes and things to different people. That's what they do, right? So I said, well, did you send it to her manager? Did you send it to her? Did you send it, where did you send it? He goes, oh, I haven't been sending it to anybody. I have a whole bunch of these tapes that are in the box under my bed. And I said, so other than me and you listening to this song right here, right now, who else has heard this song? And he said, well, just the musicians that played on it. And he didn't actually, he's not this idiot, or he would go into a studio and make these recordings. And I said, so that's it. I said, so there's no way, no how that you can possibly think of that this artist has heard your song. Is that correct? And he said, yeah. And I said, get out. Why? My case just fell apart. There's no access. If she couldn't hear it, how could she copy it? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, couldn't somebody in the recording studio or something like that?
Well, that's what we hoped.
Skank it or something like that?
That's what we were hoping for. Very good. Maybe you should do this law. I said, but before, I didn't kick him out, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I said, but before you do this, can you go back and talk to anybody else who might have a recording and find out Whether they passed it on to somebody. Could have been.
They're not gonna admit it.
Well, and plus he said he didn't think so. He had all the tapes on lockdown. I said,
Oh.
just ask. You never know.
Yeah, I was like, wouldn't make sense, because then isn't that like, what's that thing with the exception where we both come up with it at the same time?
Well, that's about synchronicity.
That's
Yeah. And that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Because there's only so many things in the air
Yeah.
that are actually moving around at the same time. So people that are, in the art world, whatever part they are in that, they're listening to the same stuff. They're seeing the same stuff. It's not that hard to guess what the next step might be. It's actually not difficult at all. So yeah, you get a lot of synchronicity issues. And again, but synchronicity, the defense to synchronicity is what? I don't know who he is. Never heard a word of him. I defended a painter once in a synchronicity case. He's on the West Coast, the other guy's on the East Coast. I mean, I can tell you the artists that they were looking at, both of them like the same artists and were doing the same kind of work. He gets a letter from the guy on the East Coast saying, hey, I saw your latest show. Your painting looks exactly like mine. Cease and desist, pox upon you and your family. How dare you? This same
Standard
stuff.
format.
And then what was the very first question I asked this?
Have you ever heard of
Have
this
you ever
guy?
heard of this guy? He said, nope. I said, have you ever been to a show of this? Nope. Have you ever, fill in the blanks? And he said, I have no idea who he is. I said, okay, I'll take the case. We won. That was it. We said, well, here's the deal. Here's our settlement offer. Go away. And it wrote us back a nasty letter and said, we'll get you next time.
Would have gone
I
away
don't
with
know.
the two floating for you kicking your dog.
If you ever do intellectual property, for some reason, most of the attorneys are just kind of rude. I don't really know why. Not that they're not other areas, but there's just something about them. They always have to threaten you and, your immediate family and things like that.
Huh.
You think you are sure night or something?
We don't do any of that.
Wow,
Sounds like personal injury.
This is a very nice letter to offer to walk away.
yeah, it's like, it's like, would you like to do your client a favor and stop billing him for these idiotic letters? Now, you're not allowed to say that, but.
You are, but it wouldn't end well for you.
Yeah, that's not really very common.
Attached here to as Exhibit A in my malpractice suit.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, so that's what happens. So again, how do we tie that into this case, all that stuff? The thing what they're saying here though is, again, it's the same, but from the viewpoint of how we fashion remedies in intellectual property, is they're howling saying, well, the whole thing's only worth $30,000. Well, and we have a number, we have proof. But the problem is that's just where you start. Because why would we just give you that money? You've suffered no penalty for what you did. We can't have you do that. You have to you can't benefit from your bad acts.
I thought the whole point of that, or at least a large part of that case, was about how, yeah, they want to give them this amount, but I thought a large part of it had to do with apportionment. Like, although we may have, violated the copyright, that's not why people came. Like, I thought it was more of the majority of the reason people came was because of the actors, the director, like the actual stars in the movie, rather than the copyrighted material from which it came from. And I thought it was a big kind of like in the equity part, a big apportionment part of, all right, so how much of your profits were based on the copyright infringement as opposed to the work that was put into it by the actors and everybody else that was involved with it.
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, you can argue that. What do you think? Now that you just said that,
Well, it's
what do you
hard.
think about that argument?
I mean, it's hard to do. I mean,
Really hard to do.
and the notes went into, there was a case where, where they sent a survey out and showed like how many people bought it based on confusion, and the court said that's not sufficient to show that, like apportionment. And then, so it's like, they make this big deal out of apportionment, and yeah, like everybody's going, but at the same time, they don't give you any kind of requirements as to what you can show.
Yeah. Oh, it's really.
And then all the note cases basically show that you really can't do an apportionment because
Well,
you can't.
but see, the problem is, but then the problem with doing the apportionment, I give you the real life stuff here for a minute, if you don't mind. So why did you use my stuff at all if you're so fucking good?
Because I can tell better than you do.
That's not your prerogative. I have a copyright. That's why I copyrighted you, idiot. Excuse my language last minute, but I actually remember saying that to somebody. Why did you use it? You know, to me, that's what my response is when people say that to me. It's like, why did you use it at all then? Or why didn't you pay the $30,000? Or why didn't you ask for permission? Or why? And you just go through this enormous amount of different things.
Let's just pay 60 and then just keep all your profits.
Yeah, and then we're done, right? I mean, I know a lot of guys out there who will just pay for it, even if they're not going to use it because they're afraid they might get sued. And it's just easier just to get it out of the way up front. That's not stupid.
But even in this one, I mean, the copyrighted work was unpublished. So how are you supposed to know that you're copying an unpublished copyrighted work?
There's almost no way.
There's no way. So I mean, if you don't know that you're taking, like, because here they're saying that the play was based off of an actual court case, and that the actual copyrighted material that this case is even being fought over was an unpublished work that nobody could have read.
But it says here, like, when they said $30,000, there have been negotiations for it, but they fell through.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure at some point after they had put in all the work to like figure it out, they might have realized, oh crap, somebody copyrighted it. But I mean, if it's unpublished, they're obviously not, they're copying the court case. They're not necessarily copying the play that was based off of the court case.
And you shouldn't be able to copy something like that. Like, you shouldn't be able to copyright something like that.
Copyrighted as an
I mean, it's just like you can go back and say, like, you have an invalid copyright.
Well, can you copyright?
Yeah,
You just copy something real slow.
Yeah, I mean, because you can copyright basically.
But I will tell you this, and again, I don't know exactly, I don't give you all the facts, but I will tell you, I can at least think of one or two different scenarios, though. And again, these are very particular to the film industry, is if you know something's under option, that's bad. And I suspect,
Under option.
well, why you would have it unpublished is because you want to option it to a movie theater.
Okay.
So it's probably known in the industry that there is the script that's sitting out there.
Oh, like shoot,
That's
like
the
these
problem.
people were actively trying to sell it to places.
You should look at this business. That's very good.
Doesn't appear.
It's not unusual because think about it. I'm telling everybody I have the script. I'm trying to sell it.
Right.
So the idea that people don't know about it is nonsense.
But
Now, whether
Francine
they know
told us.
exactly what's in it again, that's interesting. But then again, are they doing this, to avoid paying the 30? I mean, it gets like that.
I could have swore that Francine told us though, like if you're actively sending screenplays and stuff like that to companies to get them to buy it, you've effectively waived your copyright because you're no longer protecting it because you're distributing it to the
that's
public.
Yeah, but you're allowed
copyright.
to do that in the interest of, you just
That's
got
before you copyright
Yeah,
it?
like before you send it to like the copyright office, if you're sending it everywhere else, you're kind of leaving your copyright.
Oh, I thought that was even
Once
after
you have your
copyrighted
paper,
it.
put a little C at the bottom of it.
It's more complex.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you're on the right road, but again, in the industry, you have to have the right to send out your stuff, right? And so they do make allowances. They do allow you to keep it unpublished, but remember, that's not. I mean, but the funny part is, even when you say that, it's like, to me, it's kind of like, so what? Because when you go into copyright law, you don't even have to have it published. You can actually retro publish. The courts will let you do that. So again, it's tricks of the trade. Yeah, we never did file, but we'll file here. You can actually file a suit and say, here's the form we just filed. That's fine. You can do that too. Because in common law and under California law, you have a copyright the moment you embody it on paper.
Oh.
Now, if you want to protect it at the federal level, you file a copyright. So it doesn't mean you don't have a copyright.
As long as you're not orally telling people your ideas, then
You should shut up.
you should shut up.
that can come back to haunt you if you're sitting there blabbing your mouth about stuff.
And my mom's haunted by something like that right now, but
Yeah,
she invented, well, her
it
idea
happens
was,
all the time.
there was a surgical guide for implants, and like she was before they were invented, she told the lab technician to make it for her, and she's like, don't worry why I'm telling you to do it, just do it. So, yeah, it ended up being that, you know, she at a seminar to the lab technician, this is gonna make a lot of money, you know, so if you ever publish it, you give me 10%. And then now it's like every company's doing it, they're like these like snap-on smiles that are kind of like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, so it's like, I think it's a snap-on or surgical guide, I forgot what she told me, but she invented one of those that every lab is doing now. I'm like,
Wow.
that's what you get for showing off and talking to people. We should just written it down first.
Oh, that happens all the time at patent law.
Yeah, you wanted to sound smart, and now your money's gone.
Right, and see, the problem is in patent law, it's a little bit different though. Is once you show a product to somebody, you have 1 year to
Decorative things.
to patent it,
Yeah.
or it goes into the public
Yeah.
domain, and you can't copy
Really?
A
million?
it, depending on where you're at. I've had lots, unfortunately.
I've never heard of this.
Yeah. They come up with these great ideas, and then they show it to somebody, and then it's like a couple years later, you just donated it to science.
It was the snap-on smile. I remember now. So she's like, because the lab was telling her like, why do you want us to make this? If we make it, the patient's not gonna be able to use it. This not gonna be able to work. It's not gonna be able to eat it. She's like, don't worry about it. Just make it.
Dumb enough.
And it's, yeah, you put it over your implant, so it looks like you have a mouth, so you don't just have barbs sticking out.
Right.
So now every lab has snap-on smiles.
You know, I've seen those too.
Yeah, exactly. So she talked before they came out. She talked to a guy at a seminar, told her idea and what she did, and then guess what? Like a year or two later, they're all out and they're everywhere.
Yeah. I
I
mean, and I'm not saying this in this particular case, but there are people that will watch the Gazettes
Mhm.
to see, you know, well, nothing happened in here, I guess it's mine.
Yeah.
And that actually is part of law. You know, now the way around that is to file a provisional patent
Mhm.
application, which is very cheap. They're not expensive at all, and then you get the opportunity to decide what you want to do.
It's too late for her. This was
That one, yeah, that's left station.
Yeah, that one's gone.
But there are things you can do. Yeah. So. With that said, at 7:33, you want to come back in like 10 minutes or so?
Sure.
And then we'll sort of zip through. I wanted to take a little extra time with the IP cases tonight because I have a lot of personal experience with them. But the other ones we can just go pretty easy.
I like that piece. That one's been bugging me because I was there, I was at the seminar, I was just talking to the guy. I think it was like from Lumineers. And it was just like, I was like, stop. Yeah.
I think you.
I actually think that's fair. He told you to do that. After about 15 minutes, you leave.
I've done that before.
Yeah.
I was always really nervous about doing that, but
Yeah. Earlier.
I feel like you could have brought that water in much faster than that kid did. I know, I was like, I was looking around like, you can help.
You did it.
My man's gotta earn his.
Yeah.
If you want the heavy lifting job, you gotta do the heavy lifting.
Hmm?
I was like, you want to do the heavy lifting job, you gotta do the heavy lifting.
I think that's what it is, actually.
What is it?
A snickerdoodle?
Snickerdoodle? Oh, okay.
Was a fence 50?
Yeah. I ate way too much sugar here. Too much junk food. All right, what's the next case? Then we can wait for Vincent.
Not his turn.
Not his turn.
Seeing as I'm the only one that read, probably you don't have to wait for that.
Does that mean volunteer to do all briefs?
Nope.
Yeah, he volunteered.
He just volunteered right now because he assumes he's the only one that read as a punitive one. This definition.
I'm
I
fine
wanted
with
to
that.
brief all the cases. Yeah. He seconds it, so
Mhm.
good.
Overruled by the class president. Sorry.
There wasn't veto power in that.
Oh, there's veto power.
There's duties, but no rights.
No.
Yep.
As treasurer, president, class representative,
Didn't have the longest title of graduation.
I just veto everything.
One time I was working at a company before I was a lawyer, and they said, everybody here gets to pick their own title. And so I thought, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I was just kidding around, so I put in King of Beasts. I got my business card back and said King of Beasts.
King of Beasts.
That was my title. I was like, okay. And they said, now what's your real title? And I said, oh, no, you gave it to me. They knew they were in for it then. It was cool. It was a video company. Big videos for rock stars and stuff. Okay, moving forward. Again, one of those oddities. I actually used to work for a t-shirt company. I used to be the person that would kind of try to make sure that they weren't infringing on other person's copyrights, because believe it or not, t-shirts are very competitive. And we had a deal, the company I was working for had a deal with Target at the time. And so it's kind of funny because when you go into particularly in like sort of, there's like trademark and there's copyright infringement and there's all sorts of stuff. And then there's like, you go into a Walmart or you go into a Target or you go into any one of those, superstores, and it's like a different world. It's like all of a sudden all the rules go out the door and you've got these very specific rules for these very small spaces. And the reason why, think about it, is because you've got all these different products, many of them very similar in many ways, all in a very small space. And at least, I don't know if it's still the same, but what used to happen to, and there was a big scandal a couple of years ago, so I don't know if they cleaned it up or not. But what was going on routinely, particularly it was in the Levi industry, because if you ever go into one of these places, there's like 29 different kinds of Levi's, right? And so what invariably always happens is you've always got some, like, not necessarily a Levi, right? But something like Levi, something that's pretty good, maybe a Wrangler, which is pretty good, or one of the higher end ones. And what you've always gotten there, and now that I'm telling you this, if you ever want to go look for yourself, please feel free, you will find I'm 100% correct, is you will always find that there are knockoffs that try to look like the higher end pants, but they're less money, and they obviously are less quality. Now, it just so happens, I know this sounds weird, but and this is absolutely true, I'm telling you, I've seen this 1,000 times now. There's a psychology, I don't know why, but if you have, let's say that you had 8 pairs of jeans, and here was the highest end one, right? And here's the lowest end one, right? And there's 8 pairs of jeans. Did you see what I just did?
Mhm.
If you take this one here and put it here, even though this one's of lower quality than the one I just replaced, because it's next to the higher quality one, people will in their minds raise it to a higher quality. Absolutely, it just does. And all of a sudden that one on the end becomes lesser quality, even though it's not. I'm telling you, this is the way it works. So what do you think they bribe them to do all the time?
Put the shit jeans next to the nice jeans.
Yep. And so,
Yeah. I want my stuff next to the nice stuff. I don't want it with the crappy stuff.
pretty much, yeah.
Even though it's crap.
Hey,
Because
I don't think it's crap.
You do, or you wouldn't be asking to put it next to the nice stuff.
I just want to scrap.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you all these different stories about, because it's one of the things I actually had to know. I know this sounds weird, but I actually had to know about how different places and different.
So I'm gonna offer it.
You have to figure that out, right? You really do, if you want to do this type of law. Very unique, very interesting, by the way, very interesting, but very unique.
Smithfield.
Mrs. Field's cookies are pretty good.
They're good.
I have to say, they don't usually disappoint.
There was also I forgot the designer, but like he got like ridiculed for selling a 60-cent dress from China for like $30, and he said, I tried to sell it for like $5. But people thought it was cheap and wouldn't buy it, so I had to sell it more.
That's very funny. Yeah, people think something's
shouldn't have said
better
that.
quality because it's high price.
She started
That's again
sort of.
another psychology people have. It's not uncommon. So just out of curiosity though, I mean, having had to do a little bit of jeans work too, is so what do you think you would, I mean, jeans are all made of denim, so that's not the problem, whatever else have you. So what would you might change? What might you try to, what would you do to make your jeans look higher priced even though they aren't necessarily of
Well, they rip them now, right?
quality?
They changed the stitching and then rivets.
Okay, the big two are stitching, because here's something most people don't realize, that the stitching on pockets is always copyrighted and or trademarked. It can be, or patented as well. You can actually patent the design of the actual stitching. So every different manufacturer, basically by definition, has to have a different stitching on the pockets. Strange but true, the things you learn. But then the other thing too is the rivets, because rivets can be of higher quality or lower quality, and even the color matters. Because don't look, you don't have to though. What color are the rivets on Levi's?
They're gold.
Yeah, cool.
Right.
Like
So
a bright copper.
it's kind of a brightish, actually they're a brightish copper is what they look, but they look golden. So there's other companies that, don't do that. There's ones that have ones that are much darker.
So there's brass.
They're like brass, that's very common. But the people that want to imitate Levi's will use these shiny, kind of coppery, not exactly the same, but they'll use copper rivets. And these are the types of things you're looking for when you're trying to figure out if your client is being infringed upon, believe it or not. And it all starts by figuring out, how did this cheap pair of jeans get up here? That's usually where it starts. And how do you think they figure that out, by the way? How would a Levi figure that out? Like all of a sudden they're in Target and making this much money, they're making this much money.
You
All of a sudden their sales drop.
subpoena a third party and ask Target.
No, think about
But
this.
then mystery shoppers that go around to the different stores probably
Mystery shop.
and look at the different jeans that are for sale and go, oh, copyright infringement,
Yeah, that's true.
cease and desist.
You do know that at all time, by the way, not that you probably know this, you do know that at all times in every Target, every one of those stores, there's at least one plainclothes security guard and maybe two.
Mhm.
All time, 24/7. So when you see these people like looking around and you don't think they're shopping, they're not. Just so
And
you're
they're following you.
they might be following you.
Don't
You
steal,
look like the thief.
don't steal shit and you won't have a problem.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can tell them all off now. That's so many of them at this point. So, because they're the ones that, try to catch the shoplifters. And they're the ones that help you when you go in there and, for certain things. But the thing is all of a sudden, here's this store, Levi's doing this much business, and all of a sudden it drops. Invariably, you go to the store, what just happened? Somebody moved, a really inferior brand for a lot less money, but they looked like Levi's. Very common. These people are called jobbers, by the way, in case you ever wondered. They're very lowly paid people, so they were very, very easy to bribe. It's like, well, will you put this over here for me?
So is it
For
like,
a week.
I know what
is
job.
it like
I'm
an
getting.
employee at a Target, or is it just some stranger that goes to every Target and snows over like extra?
It depends.
Because the jobber, who employs the jobber?
No, they're employed by, that's their
Employed by
job.
Target.
Their job is to put things, make sure that the racks are filled, And they're actually the
He's like a
principals,
stalker or something, like
who used to just do it.
stalking,
There was no
stalking
actual
boy.
thought to it.
I don't know, I'm just wondering, like, how do they have, because there's so many targets, how's there like a network of primed people to move your product in all these stores simultaneously?
Well, there's something in corporate that outlines how the store has to be
You
set up.
should go
where
down
things
like
have to go.
conspiracy or something like
Yeah,
that.
like, there's gotta be like a huge network.
You should have like criminal problems here if you're doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like,
At one point it's rapid, just rampant in the industry.
the way I can see it happening is that one guy that doesn't work for Target just goes to every Target and moves things without asking anybody.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Why not?
Yeah, that's what I think would
Take the tag and put it there, put the crap there, put the stuff there, put the tag in, it's that hard.
just drive around the country doing that. That's the only way I see that happening. Otherwise, how do you bribe so many Target employees?
I bet. Like once you change the stacks, it would take them several days before they like
Yeah.
decide to put them back.
Oh,
you
just
know?
put everything on top of it, and they won't realize it's just.
Yeah, they'll just keep stacking the new stuff with the so it looks like it.
Yeah.
I would. I mean,
Yeah, it was one of the coolest jobs. That wasn't the coolest thing I ever did. Well, I just finding out how to do these things.
like we were.
It's truly insane.
I worked at Starbucks for like 4 years, right?
Yeah.
And there's no plan in there. Like seriously, it's just like, well, I think this looks good there, and that's the plan. Like I swear to God, like
Okay.
it's like you use someone like me who's been there for a long time and just like, yeah, you know, or like you just pick like some ditzy chick who can't steam milk very quickly and tell her to go out and like
Fix the display.
and fix the display. Yeah, and that's how it happens.
So
I
whenever
worked
you
at
grab
Bob's,
it,
and they have a master plan.
Do they?
Yeah, and like one of the stores will be set up because I was just talking to my friend about it because he's a assistant store manager, and they're like, corporate comes in and says this needs to be here, the display needs to look like this, and they are given outlines on how it has to look.
Really?
Oh yeah.
That's probably how it should happen.
No, they literally auction store space.
Do they? Oh, wow.
Markets. Yeah, you pay for a certain area.
That's why you get like those giant like Pepsi and Coke displays
Yeah.
and stuff like that for like the Super Bowl and everything.
Oh yeah. Everything in there is for auction, essentially, so to speak. Yeah, it's all up for grabs. What do you think is one of the most attractive places that's actually really, really hard to get? You have to pay a lot for this, and you never think about it because it's just
With the candy bars or something.
Yeah, where the register- by the register.
by the registers. It's extremely hard to get your candy in there. The only other type of industry that really ever got it in there was batteries, because they figured out that batteries was really an impulse buy. People don't almost never go to stores to buy batteries. It's just when they walk by them, they go, "Do I need any batteries?" I don't know. And they throw them in their thing. But those are like really, you gotta pay to get those spots. You don't get them because you're there first. Period. So it's interesting though, because these companies also like to lock that up, because then it makes it really hard for competition to break in. I mean, if your batteries are near the registers, no matter where else in the store, and they're not near there, you're not going to sell. You're not. Period. Again, it's just weird things about buying habits.
I buy mine in a giant pack
Yeah.
at Costco,
yeah, the cost.
and I have a drawer like in my refrigerator. I heard it doesn't actually help, but I leave it in there
You are the
anyways.
second person I know now that has a drawer of batteries in their refrigerator.
Yeah.
And it confuses the hell out of me. I open up a fridge and I'm like,
Let me make something clear for you. My father worked for the Department of Water and Power in Los Angeles for 38 years. It does not help. It's just,
But see,
he said that's an absolute mess.
my grandfather was a NASA engineer, and he put them in the refrigerator.
Yeah, but he worked for NASA.
NASA now.
But like,
NASA now, right? I'm talking people who want
You
to
can't even fake the moon landing, right?
actually, his thing, he built the thing that was supposed to spin the tanks on Apollo 13 that busted.
Oh, really?
He was part of that.
So clearly.
And you still put your batteries.
He wasn't.
Grandmother has a tendency to make things blow up.
It was JPL or something like that.
JPL.
I'm not sure what. Yeah.
So your grandfather has a propensity to blow things up and you're going to put batteries in the fridge.
Hey, he's
All
long
I'm
dead.
saying is that-
He's long dead. I can defame him all that I want.
Well, in that case. long as he didn't blow up Challenger, that's fine. I don't think I want to be talking about my uncle who designed the O-rings that blew up on the Challenger.
That, when the people died there, that would suck, yeah.
You can't. Don't know. Apollo 13, great movie. No problem. All right. So with all that great build-up for you, who wants to see any Hamill America? Which maybe
That's
now,
me.
this case may even be.
Is it like really hot in here?
Yeah.
Can we turn the air on?
79.
I mean, I love sitting here and sweating in a room with 4 guys. It's one of the things that I enjoy, but
Well, who doesn't?
hence why I was a wrestler.
I'll be sure to put that in my
Me
speech in graduation.
All right, so in this case, we have Hamill, who is suing 3 companies, GFI, SGS Studio, and JCPenney's for copyright infringement. Hamill prevailed at trial, basically showed that these patterns are the same. And then the initial court affirmed that and held that there was a deliberate copy of the more expensive Hamill pattern. So there are 2 options here that Hamill can collect under. One is actual damages and profits under 17 U.S.C. 504B. The other are statutory damages under 504C. Hamill wants actual damages and profits, and there's a couple questions here, but the big one is what does profits mean? Whose profits is what it really is a question. So the first step, first of all, the lower court denied overhead expenses, including things like it's not just their like lights like that, but even like a golf course membership, which they obviously requested. But then so the court laid out in Sheldon, there's this 2-step process. First is to determine what overhead expense categories, such as rent, business, entertainment, personal, and public relations, are actually implicated by the production of the infringing product. So you need to show a sufficient nexus between the category and the overhead, right? So the production and the overhead need to have a nexus. And the second step is to basically arrive at a fair, accurate, and practical method of allocating the implicated overhead to the infringement. So they went ahead and they said that using Hamill's, which is like hypothetical, right? Because Hamill didn't get to sell stuff. So it's saying that I would have sold all of these things. And that's too speculative because you're more expensive. And so they allowed the use of CFIs, which they held as not grossly erroneous or clearly erroneous, as they said. So basically what you do is you try to find, and the goal of this in the end is to find a proper ratio between the production cost and the overhead expenses. So like let's say that, these things cost, they're like X of your, well, they actually turned down the order that would have compared it to like you make X and your overhead is Y, like just hold them at equal proportions. So that like that's not good either. And in the end, we're left with this really fuzzy, terrible rule that is like I said earlier. The second step is to arrive at a fair, accurate, and practical method, and that's what we got. And so yeah, they use CFI's actual profits. That's what they use because they found it to be not speculative and fairly determinable. Okay.
What was that word?
Determinable. It is a word.
It is indeed.
I know. Apparently you added in a couple extra B's.
Maybe I did. Yeah.
That would be determinability.
There you go. Yeah. At this time of night, it's about right.
Okay, so, I mean, so so this is right down the alley what we're just talking about, right? Here we have a situation where, there's two different companies that in this case are making cloth, right? Two cloth manufacturers. And one's, cloth manufacturers, what, flowers? The actual patterns on them, how many of you have actually gone to you see these big bolts of, you'll go to a store and you'll see these big bolts of cloth. That's what we're talking about here. It's the cloth you buy at a whole cloth and things like that. If you look at them, they're not all that different. But believe it or not, it's a huge industry to try to come up with different patterns. I used to know someone who designed the flower patterns. That's why I always think of flowers, because she was really good at it. And so she would come up with these really unique kind of flowery patterns that they would put on their cloth. So she got big bucks, man. This was like big industry. And so that's what they're looking for, because to a great degree, most of them look kind of the same. So the question then becomes quality. Again, when they start to get close to each other and the flowers, I think this was a flower case, by the way, start to they start to look the same. Well, again, it's kind of what I told you about the jobbers putting everything together. When you start to get this kind of mix and blend, you start to figure it out. And again, everybody knows these are small industries. Everybody knows what everybody else is doing. Okay, we good with that? Good. Anyway, it's just the way it is. It's very small industry. Things go around real quick. And so here we have a situation where, the lesser price which managed, I assume, to get itself pretty close with the same print to the higher price point. Okay? So again, you see how it all plays together, and all of a sudden you're going, because maybe at first it doesn't look so bad, but then when you start to put the picture together, it's not great. And so here we have another situation of this. This court, the problem isn't whether they were infringing or not, the problem is what do you get for it. And so they go through some interesting analysis. Again, what are we going, you can't just charge them what they would have had to have paid. That's why you can't say, well, just pay them the licensing fee that you would, because now they're going to, obviously, it'll probably by now make way more money than that. So it doesn't deter infringers, it doesn't stop pirates. And so they've got to come to a degree of, they've got to come to a number, which this case again tells you is not always so easy, and it's not, but also one that compensates, and one that also is a deterrent to make sure that persons in the future don't do this. So in this case, they picked what? The sales that the profits, right? Now they could have also added in the sales that they had probably lost. That's a possibility, except how many people that, in this case it seems, and also this case I like because there's a theory too. Again, it never ends in intellectual property, trust me. But there's also a theory that depending on the product, you also can tie in the sophistication of the buyer as well, the actual consumer. Now, first of all, a more sophisticated buyer is what? Less likely to be confused. And also, what is the more sophisticated buyer also likely to know?
Not shop at JC Penney.
Well, yes. I can't argue with
They would be at Saks if they had anything.
That's true. That would cause a lot less problems. But along that line of thinking, what would they be more likely to know, particularly in a case like this?
They're gonna know who to buy the fabric from. I mean, they're not gonna be like, ooh, they look the same, so I'm gonna buy the cheaper one. No, they know which fabric they want. I mean,
So in other words, does your average jean buyer really know what better jeans are?
No.
Does the average fabric buyer actually know what better fabric is? Yes. So strange but true. You also have to figure out the sophistication. So because this court figured they were fairly sophisticated buyers, even though they were selling this cheaper cloth, they assumed that wasn't their audience, and they wouldn't buy it. In case you're wondering why they wouldn't do it. So again, interesting. Interesting how they do this at the slope. pretty interesting. So they just gave them the profits because that was a good number and they should have never profited it at all, right? So, fine, there you go.
But you get the profits minus overhead, right?
Minus overhead.
And the
Or a reasonable amount of overhead based on, because you can't determine, like they said, how much is used on that specific product, so they just take out a chunk of the overhead and say,
Yeah, whatever they overhead for that month is, and then they figure out what percentage of the product and check out. But yeah, that's true. You can get overhead too. It's not.
So go ahead and include your employees in your own wages.
Yeah, but
overhead's overhead.
That's what I'm
Overhead's
thinking.
overhead.
Rent, water,
How much
electricity.
does it cost to run your shop? How much can you allot to this product? That's
It
it.
seems like very hard math to do.
I feel like it leaves it
That's pretty
open
hard.
to people that just.
Let's give it to our CPA, sit down and.
But not, I mean, how do you allocate, okay,
Easily.
this portion of the rent went towards this pattern.
Well, part of it is, part of it is space, and then also part of it is allocation based on profit. So there are some hints that you can get there. There are some, but yeah, it's quite a science. And you kind of look at that number and you kind of go,
You're a forensic accountant.
Right.
No, I'm just thinking if there's a
Yeah, no, and they can take big bucks to do that.
company out there that like purposely infringes on everything, but all his employees get paid, so there's food on the table, but they just don't keep any profit beyond feeding their employees, you know? So I would just keep it open to infringing over and over. I think that's fine, they can keep the profit if they sue us. And then, you know, we'll
Yeah,
just
but
pay
then
all
you're
the
stuck in
employees.
these legal battles, and legal battles cost money.
and they're going to do things to deter that. That's they're going to smack you with something else.
Eventually they're gonna get worse and worse.
They just do. Because that's intellectual property. I mean, really, it's really hard to stop people from using intellectual property if they want to.
Mhm.
You know, it's not like, like solid stuff where you can actually lock it away. You can't do that. It's just a different thing.
Can't take your ball and go home.
You know,
No, you can't.
you can take the ethereal or the theoretical ball home, but
They still have the actual ball, so.
and they'll theoretically steal it anyways. Don't worry about it. They'll find a way. They will. I used to just not that I didn't do it on purpose, but it was funny because every so often I would go down to. You can still do it to this day if you want to see something really interesting. Actually, it's still there. I'm sure it's there to this day. If I could make it into a field trip, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But if you go down to downtown LA and you go to the center of Chinatown, there's like a market behind a market behind a market. You have to know how to get there.
For coach bags.
And you walk in there and it's just all knockoffs.
Oh,
All knockoffs. And they're really cheap stuff. I mean, you really can't tell when you're there, but it's just fascinating. You see all of this stuff. And it's like the reason why is because they all come from China, or they all come from like Singapore or somewhere over there, because they have a law there called replicas. That as long as you're making replicas and that people can tell it's a replica, it's not illegal.
Not too much.
And so that's where they come from. They all come from these sort of, although my understanding now is that the Middle East is figuring this out as well. But at least for a long time, it was all coming from the Pacific. And it's because they have these laws there. You can actually go to China and they'll have stores that say replicas available here. And that's legal. So of course they drive us crazy.
As long as the inside's blue instead of red.
No, as long as the stitching is just off enough.
As long as you just put a sign up that says this isn't the real thing.
You're paying $5 for a coach bag.
Yeah, I guess if you put up a sign saying this is not real.
Well, I went to China. Actually, I've been there several times, but I went there one time and a bunch of my friends, asked me for Rolex watches and I brought them all back a Rolex watch. Amazing, it only cost me like $5 a watch. Of course, I didn't know Rolex didn't have 2 L's, but hey.
That's a good way to know it's a knockoff.
Hell yeah, these were really cheap watches. I did bring them all over Rolex. Now, I lucked out though, I didn't realize that I could have actually gotten into an enormous amount of trouble bringing those in, because I had more than one, I had actually 5. So I could have been nailed for being a
distributor.
distributing infringer or something, but yeah. It was fun though. Anyways, but you can do that, and then you also see the video galleries, and it's just amazing. I used to have one, I don't have it anymore, I'm really sad. I used to have a Star Wars knockoff where it's a guy sitting in a theater and he's just holding up a, and you don't even realize it till halfway because some guy gets up and he goes in some language and smacks his head out of the way. The greatest
Oh,
thing.
movie?
Yeah. And it's like, you're like, whoa. Very cool. It was one of the early Star Wars movies. That's how they
Now they're all over the internet like that. The cell phone. Just hold the cell phone here the entire movie.
Yeah. I shouldn't tell you guys even enough if you really care, but there's some amazing stuff online if you know where to look for it. There's actually, I won't go into it too much, but if you're a Pink Floyd fan, there's actually a video of The Wall, Roger Waters doing The Wall, where this very entrepreneurial group of people got 4 different cell phones and they filmed it from 4 different positions and they cut it all together in a movie and you can't tell. You can't tell at all that it wasn't. It looks so professional. You can't believe it's a movie. And that's what they're doing now. And then they stick it on these different places. In my day, it was LimeWire.
Oh, God, LimeWire.
Yeah.
So many viruses from LimeWire.
But anyways, it's again, intellectual property is a very special. It's a very special beast. You'd be really surprised how just weird and seedy, and just so we're clear on the concept too. Then we'll move over. But you're definitely talking organized crime. They're definitely involved in copyright, piracy, infringement, and in certain areas of the world, you're talking about government actually sponsoring these things. So in China, it's very well known that officially there's 4 CD plants. There's really 5. The 5th one runs just at the request of the Chinese government.
Seed plants, what do you say?
Well, it's, there's only, maybe today's DVDs, but there's like, they'll say there's 4 CD plants that make
CD
CDs.
plants.
There's actually a 5th. The 5th one is owned by the Chinese government. God knows what they think of the 5th. Think about it. I mean, that was known for a long time. And so when they say things like, we gotta get China from stopping this infringement, that's right, actually, they're just off the hook crazy.
So like Trump supporter.
Well, he's right on that one. He's absolutely right. And the thing is, but if you were to say that to China, they'd say, well, first of all, this is our country, not yours. Interesting argument. The second argument is, well, we can pay you enormous, obnoxious prices, which our people can't pay anyway, or we can just knock it off here and have society go forward. That's not a great argument when you're talking about Star Wars or the latest, edition of the Avengers. But when you talk about things like Microsoft software, think about that. I mean, nobody in China can afford $500 a drop. Not going to happen. Microsoft refuses to sell. What do you do?
You get open office or legal office.
I think about it. I'm just saying. What do? You're the Chinese government. Well, let's see. We can stay in the dark ages for another 10 years. I don't know. Let's say you're in Brazil. Let's say you're in Brazil and you have it's a little different now, but it's probably similar though. But you have an AIDS epidemic, right? That's completely out of control. You go to the United States and you say, we would like to buy these drugs, the government itself, because we're going to pass them out for whatever we're going to do, right? They say, too bad, we want you to pay full price. Okay, you're the Brazilian government. What do you do?
Still
knockoffs.
pirated engine.
Okay, what do you think, Will? Should I hear? I tell you what they'll do in a minute. They actually did do something.
What do I think they should do?
Well, what did they do? In fact, it's not just should. Should is a different question.
I think that it's there's a weird legitimate argument in there for reverse engineering this and make sure people have it. It's kind of screwy, but it's in there.
So you're saying, I'm Brazil, I can have a lot of people die, or hey, we have a drug company here, we're just going to go onto the website because you filed it as a patent, and we're going to make it here. Screw you.
Yeah.
That's what they did.
Yeah.
And then the drug company, I believe it was Pfizer, they said, well, we're going to sue you. They said, Good for you.
I mean, if you follow the logic.
We're a nation state.
We're a nation.
Yeah.
Sue us. What are you willing to do?
All you do is go to war.
Yeah, we'll go to war with you. Pfizer.
No, I mean, you know, the big commercial wars of like, the 1400s, 1500s, like, there were, like, against the Portuguese and the English, and,
Yeah.
you know, it's not the first time people have gone to war over, I mean, it wouldn't be the first time people have gone to war over commercial interests.
That's true. And just to finish the story, so Pfizer sued them. Guess what happened? Public outcry was so bad that they withdrew the suit.
Oh, wow.
That's what happened. And so to this day, my understanding is they're still making generic drugs. There you go. And then when you read stories about, insulin epidemics and things like that, things that were invented many, many years ago, I don't even understand how they're still under patent myself. But anyways, we'll see what happens. Although already other drug companies are making generic insulin, just so you know. Which they can do. It's not under patent anymore. So this is just kind of a thing where, they're just, I don't know
How long do drugs stay under patent?
20 years. Up into the land of generics they go unless they figure out a way to extend it when they do, which they do from time to time, but it's kind of rare. So, but sometimes they extend patents for drugs, particularly that are very valuable but don't have a lot of audience. Occasionally you get a drug that a very small percentage of the population needs it. It's very expensive, and but they need it. So sometimes what they'll do is they'll extend a patent protection to anybody that's willing to do it, just so those people can have a drug. So that happens too.
I mean, there is a balance there because otherwise these companies will just not produce it. That's the danger, is that unless you give them a monopoly for a certain amount of time, you may not have it at all.
Yeah.
So, it's.
Well, to not have patent laws, insane.
Yeah.
That is, you're gonna have to show me another way. Because nobody's gonna make something to have it knocked off tomorrow.
Right.
And in particular. So that I kind of understand. But it's really,
It's kind of sad.
yeah.
But if you think about it for the big picture,
Yeah.
we're like, let these guys profit and create like all these kinds of cool drugs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's making more drugs that are helping more people.
Yeah.
So patience is rewarded,
Well, and when you do see these companies just in their benefit too, good, bad, or different. But when you look at the companies and you look at, their budgets, by far their biggest part of their budgets is R&D. The R&D budgets are huge. I mean, so we want them spending more money on R&D. That's really not the problem.
Right.
So we just don't want them these predatory selling tactics. Really is much more the issue, really, than anything else, I think. So, because insulin is kind of have it. Okay, anyway,
It's
so
a few deaths.
you guys thought that IP was boring. Actually, very exciting stuff. Or can be. Let's see. Okay, I think by some miracle, are we actually leaving the world of IP? Was that the
We are.
Okay, let's go ahead and keep going though, for sure. We're getting there. Oh, that's a good case too.
Okay, basically in May, they agreed to sell the land. The seller decided that he was going to excavate a chunk of the land that he made $240,000 off of. The trial court said that that the purchaser was only allowed the reduction in the value of the land, which was $122,000, as opposed to the $240,000 that was made off the excavation. And the Court of Appeal basically said, no, if it's intentional wrongful conduct, you get the entire price that you were wronged out of, which is the sale price and not the diminution of value.
Okay, so in the case of a optimistic breach, as they say, or a polite word. So you were a wrongdoer, no, you lose. Got it?
You don't get to profit off your wrongdoing.
Right, correct? Okay, go forward. That's all we need to know for that one. We already saw that earlier today. Anyway. Okay, how about what bad thing did Mobile Oil do?
What they do this
You
time?
didn't do anything.
What do they want rescinded?
It's the government, surprise,
No,
surprise.
In this case, it was the government that did something bad. So,
What government?
right, so
Alright, what did government do?
took their money.
Yes, they did.
So pretty much, Mobile Oil paid the government 156 million
Mhm.
for, I guess they're gonna start prospecting on government land to see if they can find some oil. And, contingent on, the government's gonna give me more permissions later on to drill and stuff. And then the law changed.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, the government, couldn't follow through with its side, so it had to breach, but they don't want to give the money back. But no, the court said, no, you pretty much, just because you can't enforce your contract, it means your contract, fell through, you're breaching because of the statute, so you gotta pay them back their money. So, rescission was there.
Okay, so even when you're talking about things like ExxonMobil and the government, the court cancels the transaction and reverses all benefits that have been exchanged pursuant to the transaction. That's rescission. Can they do that?
Yep, they got 156 money back.
Okay, yeah, that's not a hard case. It sounds weird because it's big players, but really it's just a rescission case. That's not too bad. Let's see, but this next case, I think is one I kind of like. Yeah, Paoloni versus Goldstein. Just so you know, here's your constructive trust case, so do know these, it's really valuable to know. But does everyone know what viatical settlements are?
Nope.
Viaticals? No, viaticals is when the person has no chance of recovering. So what you're doing is you're betting against a miracle. Okay, so this is, when you read this, and now that I told you that, these are people that are dying, that really have no chance of, they're never gonna recover, they've already been judged dead. It's just a matter of time. Viaticals, you're betting sooner rather than later.
Dying.
So this guy's complete evil, just so you know. He's taking advantage of the most vulnerable among us.
So these are people that, you mean dying is literally dying or dying?
Dying, yes, they are dead.
Okay.
They belong medical science.
Oh,
They're at
okay.
a point in their lives where medical science is only trying to make their lives easier. They're not trying to extend them. They're not getting any medicines.
So what does the settlement contract do?
Well, it's sort of a life, it's like they offer these people a life insurance contract to someone who's already been a judge to be dying and beyond the help of.
So they get, the people that are dying get money, and how does the viatical settlement make money?
Well, they pay for it, and what they usually do is they ask for a chunk up front,
Okay.
right? And then so the thing being then is that you'll pay, right?
So when you die, they get like a piece of your estate or something?
Well, yeah, or whatever they got, or
Or whatever the agreement is?
whatever the deal is.
So you're making a deal with somebody who's dying to give them money, and in the end, you're gonna take off of them.
Right.
Okay.
And so you have this kind of situation where, I mean, it's a total sooner than later play with the most vulnerable among us. And a lot of times what happens is, and we've kind of seen this before, but think of all the problems, because remember, these are people that, they're going to be dead. And so if nobody comes forward and, demands the money, are they going to work for them? No. Are they going to, fill in all the blanks? I mean, this is a really kind of, you can't say there's no reason for this part of the
Wait, so
industry.
who's
but-
getting money up front? The ill person or the company?
No, the company will be getting money up front.
Oh, I thought it was the other way around.
Well, so they're buying a life insurance policy pretty much, or death insurance.
Well, this is a true example of death insurance.
So is the money they get to spend right now before they die?
Let's see, hold on a second here. They work both ways.
No, I mean, how does it work? I know some people
Such
can-
a sale provides the policy owner with a lump sum. The third part, yeah, so basically, you get a pile of money and you end up having to pay back far more.
after you're done. Yeah, that's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I see people do it all the time, right? You get money, you buy yourself a Bugatti, you're gonna die anyway. You don't need your house after you're done.
Okay.
That's how I would do it.
I wouldn't have thrown in the Bugatti, but I like it as filigree. Okay, we can go for that. Okay, so what do you think about that? Levi?
Right, so this guy is taking money in that way from a benefits group program.
Okay.
And he is establishing trusts and corporations, including one fake entity, the Iglesia Family Trust, that he used disbursements from those contracts to purchase a condominium in Florida. Basically, so the issue with whether or not, this is basically a constructive trust case. And it's a really short case, but they held that since the money all came from these settlements and none of it could be traced to his own funds, they held it was equitable to not only do a like a lien, but a full constructive trust. And so these settlements got the house entirely, I think. I mean, it's like a one-page case, right? So like, it could have been a little bit more, I don't know, it's interesting. That's what it held.
Okay. Okay, so fair enough. A biatical settlement is a euphemistically named transaction from a Latin adjective that means of or relating to a road or journey, in which a person sells his life insurance policy to an investor at a discount for face value. Now again, this is someone who's dying, so that's what we're using. If they've already been adjudged that they are beyond the help of science. So it's only a matter of time.
Yes, can you sell it even if you're within the help of science? Can you still sell it? Like, can I get a life insurance policy right now, you know, and then sell it?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
You can sell the future value. Yeah, they can guess you're gonna die soon.
But if I'm, no, but the thing is, what if I'm not gonna die soon?
Yeah.
Or there's someone still buy it?
So, so keep that in mind. The other thing too to keep in mind is when you read this case is that the basis of the case is that the plaintiff has been defrauded by the Iglesias family. Okay, so the base of the case is fraud. In other words, he was lied to. So the question becomes, can they get these condominiums that were bought with the ill-gotten gains from the life insurance proceeds that they received due to the fraud? That's actually what this case is about. Now, it just so happens that, biaticals are just, if you think about it as a practicality, it's not an industry you want to be in.
No.
But people do it. It is legal.
Well, and you are if you do give a reasonable return,
Yeah.
you are providing good to them.
Yeah.
You're getting a huge amount of money right now, and you're gonna get their insurance policy when they die.
Yeah, I mean, they can't work. They can't, not like that.
That's basically what it is.
Call JG Wentworth. Don't call JG.
Pretty close.
Pretty close.
It's like imagine JG Wentworth, but you're dealing with people all who have terminal illnesses, if you can imagine it. So you'd see the commercial and they're
Are you dying? Do you need cash now?
Let me do it for you real quick. Are you terminally ill? That's what it's like. So think about it. That's all. But anyways, we talked about constructive trust, and this is a case where because of the fraud that we get hands on the condominiums, but the money's gone.
I'm dying and I need it now.
They do need it now. I mean, but this guy was a fraudster in addition to that. So
Yeah, but this was a fraudulent
right.
operation. But be careful. I mean, again, in the real world, I can't speak ill of every biatical company, but
Yeah, I wouldn't sign up for one. I'm just.
they don't have
that's money up front.
reputations.
You're going to die.
It's
Yeah,
true.
what are you
It's
gonna
your
do?
family that's screwed, not you.
I think you should be one to your family if you can.
Well,
When I
no,
worked at the bank, I used to get these old people in all the time and be like, "Oh, do you want to invest it that way?" And like, no, I've given them enough money during my life. I don't spend it now.
That's cool. I would pretty much just sign off at the point.
Just think, I want
At
a
the
boat.
point I don't become useful anymore to my loved ones.
I'm already at that point.
Ruffin versus Ruffin. What do you
So-
think about that? Very similar case.
Disgruntled wife is owed child support. Instead of paying child support, ex-deadbeat husband uses his $2 to get a lottery ticket, ends up winning the lottery, unlike when he met his wife, and won $4.9 million. So the wife wants a constructive trust on the $4.9 million because he used ill-gotten funds that were owed to her to buy that lottery ticket. And the court said no.
That's my favorite thing.
Because there's no way to show that that $2 was supposed to go towards child support. And
Is this the same case that we got in family law?
no, and that
Similar to it.
one,
They couldn't tell which dollar came from which person.
yeah, well, that was life support.
Oh, okay.
But no, they said that the wife failed to present sufficient evidence of fraud or unjust enrichment to warrant the imposition of a constructive trust on the $4.9 million when all he owed was like 2 months worth of support.
Well, on top of which, I mean, you have to argue that he would have depleted all of his money, and that there's no other way on the son that he has $2 to spend on this. That wasn't happening, right? Tracy,
Yeah.
everyone agree? Okay.
In this one, they were already divorced. In that one, they were married. So
Yeah.
They should have
I see you're talking about the one where they gave
the life insurance policy at the airport and the plane goes down. As I read it, as I was getting on the plane.
couldn't tell whose dollar it was.
You know, I still remember a good old
Your
days.
burden of tracing failed.
Yeah, your birth rate is down to that
You know, it's funny because there was a day, I don't know if you do it anymore, I don't think so, but you could actually go on a plane and there would be a machine and it would give you flight insurance for that flight.
Now you just get it when you buy the ticket.
Oh, you just get me buy the ticket now? Yeah, it used to be you could buy a thing from a machine, and the problem was the problem with it was people didn't really understand that it was real, and people were like constantly like leaving their fortunes to their turtle and things like that. I'm not kidding. There was this big case where it was called the Curious Case of Potter the Turtle, where this millionaire left all his money to his turtle.
That's fine. We learned in,
Yeah, it's just that's
Well,
another-
and he died.
yeah, you got it.
It turns
It
into
doesn't
saying-
violate.
Usually what happens is all family members fight over
He gets to
control over who is taking care of the turtle.
The turtle obviously needs a mansion for his tiny tanks.
Yeah, the turtle needs to go to Hawaii this weekend.
Yeah, it's just some visit relatives or something in the water.
Yeah.
So
Very
they
smart
have
one.
these things more complicated than they actually work. You know, there's also always that theory that people would, you know, put their kids on planes. I don't know if that ever really happened, but that was a theory.
Yeah, now you just buy the flight insurance, and they don't disclose to you that if you buy flight insurance, you're waiving your right to sue the airline in case the plane goes down.
Really?
Because it has a life insurance policy in it that says if the plane goes down, you get this much.
Oh, it's a
And so you're therefore-
provision.
You're buying the life insurance, and you're waiving your right to sue.
What if you crash and you
That's
survive? Do you still waive your right to sue?
Well, you didn't die.
If you didn't die,
Well, yeah, because you still it has like it's an insurance policy in case anything goes wrong, but it has capped limits, and they don't explain to you. You know, if you sign up for it, you're waiving your right to sue the airline.
it's too much hassle. Just take the insurance bill.
I'm dead anyway. The plane went down.
Just take the immediate payout.
You can maybe pay out. Invest it. You'll make your money by the time you.
Just don't get on the 737 Max.
I'll tell you what, let's do one more case. Well,
Well, that's the
because
end.
I think there's only one more.
Yeah, and Ray Littner's last one.
Oh.
Yeah, this one was
oh yeah, I see.
We only had to do it at 7:37.
Yeah, no problem.
Speaking of
Yeah, make sure you keep
7:37,
this for next week. I did two at once for this week. Yeah, we only have one left. I thought that was,
so this case.
okay, good. Okay, one month.
Mary
I
Littner.
thought we only had one left, no, so I don't have my handout.
and it goes further.
Yeah. Well, because it's all one section, we're just gonna keep.
Ah, yeah.
So this guy's trying to pull a fast one. Is we got Littner here. He signed up with the plaintiffs, or is it bankruptcy legal? Signed up for the plaintiffs for their accounting services to help them with their books, and he embezzled a large sum of money from them and put it in a trust that bought him a house that he and his wife now live in. And you know, they said when they figured out that the fraud happened, they put it in this Clark. No, wait, no. When you created the fraud, later the CEO, I guess, the trustee was called Clark. And I'm just gonna finish it. Okay, so because I'm gonna think, okay, whether I'm just gonna explain. So the plaintiff hired the defendant to do his books and his accounting. The defendant, he embezzled a ton of money and put it in a trust and that trust bought a house for him and his wife. But he did all this through fraud, and then there's evidence of him actually committing the fraud. That, you know, this house was like $410,000. But you know, when they discovered the fraud, he filed for bankruptcy and then tried to do like all these like homeowner exceptions, like this is my house, you can't take it from me, and he's arguing there's no constructive trust. But you know, they said no, the way you did everything with all this fraud, you can't really hide it under bankruptcy when I went that's like. Yeah, they had him sign over the house back to these plaintiffs, the full title.
They basically said that ill-gotten property never belonged to you, therefore the bankruptcy court has no jurisdiction over it, and therefore they can't take it from you in bankruptcy. It has to go back to the person
Right.
in which you defrauded from.
Yeah.
In other words, fraud vitiates actual ownership. And so it's really not subject to the laws of bankruptcy, which would get them in trouble anyway.
Would have been
You
smart.
know that you can't make these fraudulent transactions, and you're going to get in a lot of trouble. I don't know which is worse, getting in trouble with federal bankruptcy laws, or you really take your choice. But you guys have bankruptcy?
Yeah.
So you know about fraud.
You realize we graduate in a month, right? So we've had every class we're going to have. I think you've asked us that twice. I'm like, I don't think you realize we graduated.
You're thinking you have
Another semester or so? No, we're done.
Okay, you're done. Okay.
3 classes left.
No, we don't. We're done. Oh,
3 classes.
Individual classes, yeah.
3 individual classes left.
And then review week, right?
Crazy.
No,
Yeah.
2 individual classes and review week.
No, we have 3.
Because 1 week is spring break.
Oh, yeah.
But somehow it's listed on syllabus that we have 3 reading weeks.
Amazing. Wow, I still remember when you guys in my first year. Amazing.
Wow. Glad we're done.
It's been a good rodeo. Glad yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't fallen off the horse just yet. I still got a couple more weeks to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
So with all the absences, we saved up, we just not show up the rest of the year.